Hey everyone, and welcome to this special coverage of Budget 2002. And there's a lot riding on this one, 2 years of pandemic. We're now going to figure out what needs to be done to make sure that the economy continues to grow, continues to bounce back. Elections coming, a whole lot to talk about. And we've got some fantastic guests all through the day. But first, let me welcome the co-anchor for the entire show, Rajiv Dubey, Editor-in-Chief of Fortune India. Rajiv, great to have you here with us, and it's going to be a long and a fairly exciting day. We have a whole bunch of very special guests, just about everyone from corporate India, CII, Amitabh Kant's going to be with us, Rajiv Chandrasekhar later in the day, and we're going to be talking to all the major experts in this digital-only show. First of all, good to be doing a digital-only show, Rajiv.
Yeah, perfect timing as well, because of the extent to which our 4G coverage has increased, the way the youth is taking on to the digital world, and also less and less of live broadcast television. So hopefully this is going to be one of the early ones to make an impact on digital only shows. The big challenge, of course, as we know, is before the finance minister is the growth. Despite the fact that we are going to be 9.2% in GDP growth this fiscal, it's still concerning is that we've lost 2 years of GDP, and our GDP at the end of the fiscal is still going to be barely 1.3% higher than what it was in 1920. So how do you achieve a faster acceleration in the GDP growth is the biggest challenge before our finance minister.
Right. So let's just touch upon, before we start welcoming all of our experts on, let's just try and touch upon, if we can, Rajiv, what would be some of the major things to look for? We've got some sort of a indication that when it comes to tax and spending, the fact that there is a fair amount of tax buoyancy that we seem to be seeing in the economic survey April to November, it means that there may well be the fiscal space this time not to be pushing up taxes, maybe to be having a lot of spending both on welfare and infrastructure. Would those be some of the things to look at?
Yes, and Vikram, the big challenge, as I said, growth is required, acceleration in growth is required. But how do you achieve that growth with two engines of your economy? Private consumption and private investment not firing at all. Only engine that is really firing is the public expenditure, which is what the government spends in the economy. And the second engine, which is the exports, is just about coming into action, because even in exports, where we are today is just about what we were in 2013-14. So we've lost 6 years in exports. So how do you achieve as a nation the growth acceleration that is required in the economy with barely one engine firing, the second engine coming into action, and two engines not working? So that is really the biggest challenge before the finance minister at this point.
All right, we're being joined by Rajiv Singh, partner Deloitte. One of the first people who's going to be coming and telling us what exactly we should be looking for. So Rajiv, you know exactly what's in the budget, right? So tell us what are going to be the 5 major takeaways when we chat again after the budget is done.
No, so of course, Vikram, I don't think so that we are crystal glazers and we can glaze and find out what is there in the budget. But Vikram, I think the 4 expectations or the 4 themes that I think we are looking forward to in this budget are, namely, the first theme is going to be around job creation, Vikram. While there is a lot of talk in terms of the great resignation, a lot of demand for talent, it's largely all around the ITES sector. My colleagues in especially the manufacturing sector don't feel the same way. And hence I think that is going to be first theme of focus is going to be around the job creation. The second theme, in my opinion, Vikram, should be around something to do with Atmanirbhar Bharat, or in a manner as a China, second to China as an option from an India perspective. I think we still continue to import a lot of electronic auto components from China, and I think That should be the second theme that we will be looking forward from the budget. The third theme, which I'm very keenly looking forward, is something to do with green energy, given the focus that we have in terms of reducing our carbon emissions and so on. So that is the third focus that we will be expecting from the budget. And lastly, and most importantly, is that can the budget help in improving the customer or the consumer sentiment, so that eventually we see demand generation? That is what is hitting most of the sectors right now. So can we see some demand generation going up? Those are the four themes, Vikram, that I will be looking forward to this budget.
So you're a manufacturing expert, Rajiv, and one of the areas, one of the ways in which the job creation can be generated, job creation can be created is via manufacturing. You know the state of automobiles, and you are an expert in that area as well. How do you think that these can be, job creation can be triggered in manufacturing?
So the most important thing is that unless and until you see new investments coming in manufacturing, and you find new manufacturing plants being set up, job creation is going to be always a difficult task. So the easiest way is if we can see some new investments, whether it is domestic or whether it is FDI. There has been some amount of uptake, I would say, in terms of investments in this year, but also in what kind of manufacturing segments are we seeing investments happening. So even within manufacturing, say if there are investments which are happening in more automated plants and so on and so forth, vis-a-vis, say on the other end, if I say it's textiles, say for example, or leather as an industry, for example. So the job creation in different segments within manufacturing is also different, Rajiv. So we would expect, at least in this budget, a little higher focus, I would say, on the micro, on the medium and the small enterprises. That constitutes a very, very large chunk from a manufacturing perspective. So it's not just the big manufacturing plants that we would want the country to see, but we would also want a healthy growth of the micro, medium, and the small enterprises in the country.
Vikram? I think there's been a bit of a problem with the network. So the other aspect, do you expect something on the tax front? There has been this whole demand, especially from the middle class, because we have not been able to bring in any relief practically for the middle class, at least in the last budget, and even in the one before that, except for some tinkering of the personal tax slabs. So do you expect anything on that front, because that is really one of the bigger demands after the corporate tax had been slashed?
So ideally, yes, we would love to, and let me present some or talk about some data. For example, Rajiv here. For example, auto as a sector, which is a very important sector, we have always seen, and it contributes to about, say, 48-49% of the manufacturing GDP per se. We have seen that the demand in cars does not necessarily align with the growing GDP in the country. We have seen that the correlation between the growth of passenger vehicles is more related to the net disposable income in the hands of the people. So what is more important from a demand perspective is not going to be just the growth in GDP, but the net disposable income. And that's where taxation plays an important role. Though we always have an expectation if some tinkering could be done so that the net disposable income can go up. But I don't know whether the government will have that much amount of flexibility in this year, given that the expenses that the government is expected to do, especially in the infrastructure and the healthcare sector, is going to be significantly large. But whatever can be done in terms of increasing the net disposable income is going to be very critical from a perspective of demand creation, Rajiv.
Yeah. Rajiv, hi.
Yeah, hi, Vikram.
I think
looks like Vikram is having some
connection
problems.
There are internet issues that we're dealing with right now.
No worries.
One of the things that I mentioned just before you joined and we were talking about this is that here is the government trying to accelerate the GDP, accelerate growth in GDP. and yet it has to rely on practically just two engines of the economy. One is, of course, capital expenditure, the government will do by itself, and the second is exports to some extent, which are again haven't yet even reached the numbers or levels of 2013, 2014, right? So we lost about 8 years in exports. We've lost 2 years of GDP growth, private investment, and private consumption. And you've seen, you being an auto expert, you've seen the state in which the decadal low numbers that we are seeing as far as the auto industry is concerned in terms of consumption. How big is this challenge to deal with all this, and what are the options according to you before the finance minister?
No, completely agree, Rajiv. I think the private consumption and the private whatever investment that we are seeing is not really picking up. I think the government will have to deal this from a perspective of building a little more confidence with the industry. I think from an auto perspective, if you see, there is a lot of uncertainty which is there both from an industry and from a consumer perspective. There is a thrust towards electrification. There is a thrust towards changing the powertrain technology and so on. But when we go to the market and talk to the consumers, we find that the consumers are a little confused at this point in time. If there are certain set of consumers, say, who are willing to buy a new vehicle or who are looking at exchanging their current vehicle that they have, they're uncertain whether they should go for an ICE vehicle right now, or they should go for an electric vehicle, for example, at this point in time. And that uncertainty is unnecessarily or unfortunately making them to postpone their decision of buying a vehicle at this point in time. Now that is something I think that we need to address. We need to have a very clear clarity in terms of what is the future direction that we are going to get into. Similarly, I think from a manufacturing perspective, this sector has borne so much of weight over the last few years, I would say, that they want to be very, very certain with the future demand that is likely to be before making any investment. They want to ensure that they sweat all their assets currently before putting any further money into new asset creation. So I think that is the stage, that is the phase that we are going through, Rajiv, currently. I think we are playing a little hide and seek.
Yeah, you lost him again.
He comes and then he goes away.
Yeah. So, and as far as exports are concerned, the automotive sector itself is one of the biggest exporters. Manufacturing, especially the smaller medium enterprises, some of the other elements or contributors to exports. How do you see that? In the context of even the global scenario, where actually even the IMF and the World Bank are predicting and projecting lower economic growth. So this acceleration that we have seen in exports, do you think that can sustain at all? Because if the international or global economy is going to be under distress because of the withdrawal of all the stimulus, do you think this can even sustain?
No, so Rajiv, I would say that, see, when the global economy is under stress and we don't see the global economy really growing at the pace at which we expect it to grow, I think those countries which have a larger share in the global trade should be more worried. Given that India's share on the global trade is so small at this point in time, I think our growth in exports is not going to be related so much to how the global economy is doing, but can we find some pockets where we can continue to grow our exports? I think that is what is going to be more important. We have seen time and again that we have done very well when it comes to, say, the IT and the ITES segment. I think we have been able to continue to grow, and the demand for ITES, despite the global economic slowdown, is going to be very, very high. That is a sweet spot, I think, from an India perspective, because we have the right talent, we have the right ecosystem here in the country. So we should expect continuous growth from the ITES sector. But even within manufacturing, the share that we have is a small. I mean, it's just about 1.5%. That's all in the entire global manufacturing sector. In that, what we should look at is, okay, what are those products that we can do better from an India perspective, rather than going for scale. I think India will be better off by focusing on few high-tech components that can be produced in certain segments. So my view is that let's not bother too much about how the global economy is doing, given our share is very, very small. I think let's focus in terms of which are those sub-segments where we can really grow our share in the exports. It's going to be the bigger economies, I think, that get more impacted when there is a slowdown.
Right. Rajiv, just wanted to, both the Rajivs, hi. Just wanted to one of the out of the left field sort of examples of something that might be done dramatic today. Is there the fiscal space right now to do something like pushing ahead with UBI, talking about some more support to the poorest of the poor? Because at the end of the day, the poor are the ones are really suffering after 2 years of the pandemic. Is that something which you think might just come in?
No, it's quite possible. It's quite possible, Vikram. See, we also need to keep in mind that this budget is going to be presented under the shadow of, say, 5 state elections, which is just a couple of weeks away from now. And we know that in the last 2 years since the pandemic hit, there was significant amount of job loss, especially in the micro, small, and medium segment. Not just manufacturing, cutting across manufacturing and services, but largely in the micro, small, and medium segment. We did see a lot of exodus of labor from the urban into the rural areas back. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are some special outlays or there are some special announcements which are made from a perspective of the rural economy, keeping in mind. I think one of the other things, Vikram and Rajiv, that I wanted to highlight is for example, I also drive the auto sector. And from an auto perspective, if we look at it, two-wheelers, for example, have not seen the revival of growth. Two-wheelers, 60% of two-wheelers in the country get sold in the rural area. And while, say, in 2019, we sold about 20 million two-wheelers in the country, currently we are at about 15-16 million units, which means that we have not yet seen the revival of the two-wheeler industry, which is a very clear indication that despite all the talk, the rural economy is not yet bounced back. So I wouldn't be surprised if the government has a larger focus, a larger thrust on the poorest of the poor, and there are some schemes which can be announced for them.
Right, Rajit Singh, thank you so much for joining us. Radhika Gupta now joining us, the boss at Edelweiss AMC, the person who knows exactly what's happening in the market. Radhika, quick, look into the crystal ball and tell us by the time the budget is over. Sensex up 10,000 points, 1,000 points, down 2,000 points. What's going to happen?
I wish I knew, although the budget the budget is a one-day event, but look, I think it does just play some role in shaping the way forward. I think the good news is capital markets are going into the budget with extremely strong sentiment. I think if I compare a year ago, the good news is we are starting when market sentiment is very good, despite the fact that there is noise about inflation, Omicron to a certain extent, and a rate rise. So I think the starting point is actually very good. And as long as you don't upset the apple cart very much in the budget and do more of the same, I don't think markets have a reason to be unhappy.
Right. The markets are particularly happy today. Rajiv, did you see that rally overnight on the NASDAQ, especially in exponential stocks? Tesla, 10%, Spotify, 14%. I mean, you name it, it was all up quite sharply yesterday.
Yeah, if we were looking at 10-year trends before and after budget, and it's a mixed bag. And, we've seen markets reacting very, very differently on all occasions. So very hard to get a sense of which way the market has been, is going to look at it. But what do you make of the fall in the markets, Radhika, in the past week particularly?
So look, I think some of it was expected, and it's a very polarized fall. So if you look at the last quarter of results from a market point of view, financials have done extremely well. In fact, banking has been fantastic. It's driven quite a bit of the holding up that we've seen of Nifty, and then you've had a certain segment of what I call highly valued companies, and of course tech as a sector and some of the new age businesses take a sharp fall. Now, some of this is expected because of the noise around rising interest rates. So some of it is not, and a lot of these companies were trading at significantly higher valuations. So does it come as a surprise? No, I don't think it comes as a surprise. I think even within this pack, there will be companies that finally deliver fundamentally on earnings among the new age businesses, and they'll find their feedback, and we are seeing that, and there will be some that will not. So Does the fall come as a surprise in the back of all the Fed comments? No, it doesn't. And India has had some impact of, when global markets sneezes, India also has some element of cough. So I think that is what you've seen. But within that, I think there will be companies that will bounce back, and then there will be companies that were just benefiting from the rush of liquidity that we saw last year. You can't deny the amount of liquidity that we saw last year.
So liquidity clearly is going to fade away. There's likely to be hikes of interest rate in the US, all of that. So the entire environment may not be as benign or as good for assets as it has been. But what specifically do you think the stock markets would be looking at from the budget? We keep hearing hopes that LTA, long-term capital gains, remove it, kya fayda hai iska? I don't know if that's going to happen or not, especially with UP elections around the corner. But what are the markets looking for?
Look, Vikram, every year the market wants STT to go away and long-term capital gains to go to zero.
I can assure you, you're not getting both of them.
Exactly. I can probably assure myself that I'm not getting either of both of them. And I don't think perhaps that's where the focus should be. When I saw the last gentleman on your channel as we were starting, I think the fact is that we've had a very, very meaningful K-shaped recovery in the markets. And if you look at the companies that all of us track, which are probably the top 200-300 companies, they have done very, very well. But the fact is that it's been an unequal recovery. The rural side of the economy, the SME side of the economy has had pain. And ultimately, you can't live life in a K-shape. Even corporate earnings in the long term need private consumption to come back. They need the rural economy to come back because that's pause investment. So I think if there is a focus, it has to be on that side of the economy. Much as I love all the talk about STT and long-term capital gains, I think it's really, and to the point about liquidity, if liquidity is going to go away globally, then you will also see some impetus on RBI to pull back liquidity. So that has to be replaced by government spending. So I think spending and really making sure consumption comes back in the lower strata of the economy is probably more important for the markets than some of the tax measures that we love to ask for every year.
One of the expectations, the great expectations in this budget, Radhika, is that there should be some relief for the middle class. Now, how's the investing community looking at this? How are you looking at it? If at all there's greater leeway, what does that mean for the mutual fund industry, for especially investments coming into the stock market?
So I think there are two parts to it. From a capital markets point of view, Rajiv, it is always a balance. I mean, giving some leeway to the middle class is always a balance between growth and striking prudence. And the market is always in favor of prudence. At least my view is this year we can, we haven't, like other economies, spent our way out of this crisis. So we have some space. And I don't think the market will worry too much about that as long as we can get some things like disinvestment right. We made a big commitment on asset monetization and disinvestment last night. So if we can balance the fiscal with that, I think that'll be good. I think from a mutual fund industry point of view, if you're putting more money in the hands of the middle class, and we've done a very good job getting the middle class financialized in terms of bank accounts. If there are incentives for people to invest and ultimately channelize money into domestic savings, that's very good for our industry. That's very good for markets. I mean, I must remind you, in all the bloodbath that we've seen, we still have an industry I represent that does 11,000 crores of retail SIPs a month. And perhaps if you didn't have domestic investors, this bloodbath would have been much larger.
That's actually a really, really fascinating point that you make, Radhika. And that's perhaps one of the big changes that we've seen in the last few years. A lot of retail participation, a lot of SIP money coming in. This is long-term money. So it's no longer FIIs pull out and the Sensex crashes, 10%. There's a lot of retail investment coming in. What can be done to encourage that further? Because you're also seeing another trend that instead of doing retail SIPs in mutual fund, which is literally sahi hai from a long-term financial stability point of view, you're also seeing young people saying, yes, ab chodo, let's buy Bitcoin instead, which is slightly scarier for the rest of us who are cryptocurrency, what is going on.
it's very scary for all of us. And by the way, I do hope in the budget they make some comments on regulating cryptocurrency, because ultimately any individual should be investing in a regulated asset class. I think from a mutual fund industry point of view, we have quite a bit in place, but any tax incentives, for instance, including mutual funds in Section 54 EC, there is still a lot of tax disparity between mutual funds and insurance products, for instance. ULIPs, which are unit-linked insurance products. So I think recognizing the fact that mutual funds are a long-term investment vehicle, that finally does a lot for capital markets and is probably the right way to get a young consumer, young or old consumer into the market by way of, small tax incentives, I think will be a very, very powerful thing. The mutual fund industry has, of course, made specific recommendations along the lines of 54 EC, debt linked, getting more money not only into equities, Vikram, but also into long-term debt, because that part of the industry is not penetrated. So a few of these things I think will go a long way.
But let me just throw that to Rajiv. Rajiv, cryptocurrency regulation, banning, taxation. I don't know if you're one of the people who sits and speculates in, Ethereum or Solana, or if you're one of those who feels that this is a giant Ponzi scheme which is eventually going to go down to zero and a lot of people are going to get hurt. So I don't know which side of that divide you're on, but
so Vikram, it's neither. In fact, if it is well regulated, it can be as an asset class. You can bring in a crypto assets, right? And provide the right the framework, the right regulations. What should be the KYC norms, how you should be regulating them. If all of that is brought in, the concern for every nation, any nation, is one, that it as a fiat currency, if it comes in or it starts to substitute fiat currency, that's when it becomes a big concern for any country. If it is if it's like a token, or if it's like one of those asset classes which are regulated very tightly, I don't think that is something that can be a concern. And it is happening around the world. And if it is regulated tightly, it should not be such a huge problem. And everything underlying the technology, underlying the cryptocurrency, is such a fascinating technology. It can be utilized and deployed in so many areas, in keeping track of things, that from manufacturing to services to even art forms, that it's not something that can be wished away. It really needs to be regulated.
Really needs to be regulated. We're seeing live shots from Parliament out there. What we understand is that it's going to be a tab that Nirmala Sitharaman is going to be reading out of, but inside the Bahi Khata. So the live shots that you're seeing there from Parliament, she's going to go inside and start to speak about 55 minutes or so from now. Madan Sabnav is with us now, economist in the Bank of Baroda. Madan, almost there with us. Okay, fine. We'll allow you to sit down, Madan. Hey, how are you? Madan, you're on mute. Okay, now you're not on mute.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so Madan, we were just sort of trying to figure out what some of the major highlights could be. Cryptocurrency and some sort of regulation or some sort of stuff around cryptocurrency is one possibility. But before we ask you in the specifics, your broad sense on what you as, what are the broad points of what you think you'll be looking for in the budget?
No, in fact, the way I look at a budget is that it's an income and expenditure statement of the government of India. And one has to be a bit realistic when juxtaposing this with policy expectations. So given this background, I would say that what I would be looking at probably 3 or 4 things. Number one is what is going to be the fiscal deficit, because there are the FRBM norms which talk about going to the number of 4.5% by 2025-26. And if we go by what the economic survey says, that the fiscal story has been very good this year, it would probably mean that we may be doing better than the 6.8% number, which was projected last year for 21-22. So which means that we could probably be thinking of going towards a number of 6%. The second important thing would be whether there would be an extra push given to capital expenditure. I think that's what all analysts, economists are asking for. Now, how high will this 5.5 lakh crores number be? Will it go up by 10% or 20% or 30%? I think that would be an area of interest. because again, the economic survey says that it does expect investment to be the driver of the economy. And if that is so, I think the government has to give the push once again, because we haven't seen too much coming from the states or from the private sector. The third area of interest, I think, would be on disinvestment, because that number has always been elusive. And based on the number which is going to be put for 22-23, we can guess whether the LIC disinvestment is taking place in 21-22 or whether it's going to overflow to 22-23. In fact, if it takes place in 21-22, then it also means that there'll be less elbow room to garner resources, because there are no other big tickets of the size of LIC which can be carried out in 22-23. So disinvestment would be the third important thing. And the last I would say is that this entire thing about the food relief, the addressing the concerns of farmers. So there have been lots of cash which has been given in the form of Nirmala or PM Kisan or free food. And whether the government is going to persevere with that or not, because there are, of course, contradictory things here. One is, of course, that are we really certain that there won't be another pandemic? There may be provisions which have to be made, but the budget may not have to announce anything, but could always announce it as and when the situation arises. But more importantly, we have the elections coming up in several states. So probably at this point of time, saying that we are withdrawing on the so-called relief for the poor and the farmers could be an interesting thought which comes to me. So I think these are the probably four things which I would be looking for in the budget.
Okay, let me just toss that to Radhika as well. Radhika, on the numbers, if there's one thing in the economic survey that I think stood out and surprised many of us, it was just how buoyant tax collections have been in the last 9 months. I mean, like almost off the charts, especially even in the last 2 years, compared even to the pre-pandemic period. Did that surprise you? And does that mean that you think there might be good news when it comes to both the fiscal deficit and potentially on the ability to spend? The fiscal room to be able to spend a lot on capital expenditure?
So I think it was a positive surprise. And I think, Vikram, it is an important point because, I mean, the budget, any budget is always a balancing act between fiscal prudence and growth. And I think, as I said, one, we have not overdone the stimulus. Second, you're coming on the back of tax revenue being strong. And all of us are talking about capital investment, helping, the K-shaped part, the bottom part of the K come back. I think you have room to spend. And I think that's a very good place going into the budget. Not many governments can boast to that. Between tax revenue and to sort of echo the last point, if you can continue to get your disinvestment act together, that's always been a little bit of a mixed bag. But if you can get disinvestment, asset monetization, and your tax revenue continues to be strong, you have some space to spend, and you don't need to over worry then.
Yeah, Rajiv,
where in your view will the job creation come from? Where will that come from? Especially now that hopefully the service sector will probably start to come back to action. Looks like the economy is going to be March, April onwards. I think practically after vaccinations reach a certain level, I think it will be opened up. So there will be some jobs coming back into the service sector, but what we need are far, far larger numbers as far as job creation is concerned. Where do you think that will come from?
I think, Rajiv, there are 2 points there. One is that you really have to look at urban job creation. You found a model for rural job creation. It can come out of government projects. It can also come out of, as you said, it can't just be service sector. I think housing, for instance, I mean, real estate is on the verge or is seeing some kind of revival. If you can do things that spur the housing industry, that's an industry that employs a lot of people. To the extent you can do things for the auto industry, that's an industry that spurs a lot of people. India is also beginning to get its act right in manufacturing. So our story is not only software services, pharma, etc., etc. I mean, the PLI scheme, for instance, has been very successful from a mobile phone point of view, air conditioners, etc. So if you can spur manufacturing, that's finally where jobs come from. Housing, as I said, is another big one.
All right. A number of things. Can I just throw that to you, Madan, on the question of unemployment and the question of where are the jobs coming from? Is that, to your mind, the one big concern that the finance minister would have, certainly should have right now? Where are the jobs coming from?
So actually, let me put it this way, Vikram. I think employment has been a problem even before the pandemic, and employment is generally created in the private sector, not in the government sector. So what the government can really do is to provide certain incentives to specific sectors. And here I think it has done fairly creditably, because if you're looking at, say, for example, the SMEs, you look at the PLI, which Radhika was talking about. I think these are areas which have been focused on by the government. Then we have the direct capital expenditure of the government. So when the government spends on roads, railways, it's automatically demand for products which are linked to it, say steel, cement. I think they have done very well, primarily on account of the push which has been given by the government. And accordingly, we see jobs being created. But to my mind, while employment is definitely one of the thoughts which come into the budget, everything has to be done within the confines of the fiscal deficit. I think that's the starting point. Because when we had a chance of overspending during the pandemic time, in the sense of having a fiscal deficit of 10-15%, by giving away a lot of cash, by just doing the Keynesian thing of digging holes to fill them up, I think we followed a conservative path. We still had a high fiscal deficit. That was more because of revenue shortfalls rather than expenditures overshooting. So given this ideology, I would tend to think that the government goes towards 6%, and within the resources which are available, you do your best through the budget where you can bring about employment. But let's remember one thing, all this takes time. Even when we're talking of PLI, it's a scheme which runs between 3 and 5 years, and you get the PLI only in case you're able to invest and you're able to produce the comparable amount of output which is there. If you don't do it, then you don't actually get the benefit. So we'll get to know how effective PLI is only after maybe 3 or 4 years, when companies have opted for it, they've applied for it, and they've actually managed to get this investment on ground and managed to get the production. I think that's when we'll actually see the jobs being created. But I still believe job creation has to be in the private sector. Private sector will not employ more people until there's enough demand. The demand side story has not been addressed so far. It's a problem which was there in 2018, 19, 20. Now it's carrying on even right now. Most of the government policies are more on the supply side, something which I think even the economic survey has spoken of. But it's time for the demand side, because if I have to spur demand, it's necessary for me to do something on taxation. And I think that taxes is something which the government has been very, very rigid on. They've given something for corporates, but for people like you and I, we've not got any benefits. In fact, as our income increases, we pay more taxes. And I think this is where I think the problem is, that we don't have lobby groups for individuals. We have lobby groups for industry, but we don't have it for individuals. And therefore, I think consumption demand creation is actually outside the purview of the budget, as long as we decide not to change the tax structure. And they won't change the tax structure because tax is an easy way for earning revenue.
Well, you never know. We did see cut in corporate taxation leading to a dramatic jump in corporate tax revenue of the economic surveys to be believed last year. So who knows? Laffer curve alive and well, and maybe it's something that the finance minister will keep in mind. Radhika, before you go, one of the things that you would like to hear in the budget, and what is it that you would not like to hear? What are the sort of phrases that will say, oh, Sensex down 2,000 points and everyone very unhappy? What could that be?
One thing, and I say this year on year, that I would not like to hear is any material change to our securities and tax regime. While we talk about domestic investors being important, historically in the budgets you've had plus and minuses on taxation and very inconsistent policies, especially when it comes to global investors, and that causes a lot of uncertainty, especially when a time when rates are rising. So, global markets are already nervous about emerging markets. So consistency in policy, I think, is more important. And one thing I'd like to continue to hear is execution of things, Vikram, that they said in the last budget, particularly around asset monetization and disinvestment. Every budget doesn't need to come up with new innovative ideas. Ultimately, it's about execution of what you said.
Rajiv?
Yeah, Radhika, the important thing as far as consumption is concerned, do you think that, the point that Madan raised, one of the things that the two areas that are not seeing any action, as we know, are private investment and consumption. Do you really expect tax cuts when it comes to driving consumption as far as the government is concerned? Otherwise, with the level of capacity utilization that we have in the industry, private investment is not going to come back. So both are related, and that one half of the engines that actually tend to drive the economy are not going to be working until any of these happens. So what could be that trigger then, in your view?
I think so. One, I think it's undisputable, and I think if you heard either me or Madan or anyone is talking, we are all acknowledging that you can't you can't get away in this budget without addressing that side of the economy, because ultimately private investment comes from consumption. Ultimately, even your corporate earnings, will be spurred by increased consumption. The answer is tax, or the answer is government doing some direct spending. I also, I think, reiterate the point around employment, because employment ultimately triggers consumption.
Right, Radhika, thanks a lot. And I know you might have to drop out and leave us soon. So thank you so much for having been with us. Madan, let me just throw that question back to you. Now, okay, it is good that there may be some space to do something, some fiscal space, because revenues have gone up so sharply as per the economic survey. Do you expect to see the finance minister signaling a return to some sort of a pathway for the fiscal deficit to say, okay, pandemic's over, we're now going to get back to a certain consolidation pathway, and this is what the pathway is going to be? Is that an announcement you think you will see?
No, absolutely, because I think this has been the ideology which the government has always reiterated, even in the past, even in the first regime, that fiscal prudence is of prime importance. And I think it's a good ideology to follow. Like, we may have differences of saying that the government needs to spend more, but the fact that we say that we are committed to the FRBM path and we're looking at a number of 4.5% by 25-26 means that we will have to gradually scale down the fiscal deficit from the level of, say, 6.5, 6.8, whatever it turns out to be today for 21-22. Maybe around 0.5% every year till we reach the 4.5% number. And just let's remember that even 4.5 is definitely much higher than the 3%, which we have held on to for a long period of time. So I think there will definitely be quite a bit of talk on what the ideology of the government is and how soon it wants to get to this number of 4.5%. And the fact that revenue has been very buoyant in this year, even though we had a second wave, we had a second lockdown, obviously tax revenues have been very buoyant, which gives us a confidence that even in 22-23, with the GDP growth being 8.5 or lower, higher, whichever way it turns out to be, we would still be seeing a similar kind of buoyancy in tax collections, which would probably afford space for the government to move along the fiscal path. But I don't expect them to say that, okay, I'm earning more revenue, let me spend more, let me have a higher fiscal deficit. Probably that's not something which I would be expecting.
But then if the government does, let's assume, intend to trigger consumption via tax cuts, where do you think are the best options?
See, this again is a very tricky issue, because ideally, I think because we have seen in the past that even in case you cut income tax rate, it's quite possible that I may not consume. I could always be saving that additional money which I save. So, but tax cuts across income tax, I think that is something which definitely is required. And something which is outside the budget is in terms of the GST rates. I think indirect taxes are something which needs to be properly reduced. I think that is something which could be done outside the budget, but which need to think seriously about. But again, these are things which I think, at least on the commodity taxation front, I think the government may be a little more reluctant to do it, because that's where the buoyancy has been witnessed. That every time you're saying there's pent-up demand, there's additional spending taking place, there's a tendency for your revenue to increase. So probably at this point of time, they may not choose to do such a thing on commodity taxation, but definitely in terms of income tax, it should be a proper cut in income tax, not just a case of saying that the exemption limit for certain people who are above 60 or 70 moves from 2.5 to 3 lakhs. I don't think that's going to be a big thing. The people who are above 10 lakhs, that is the so-called middle class and above, I think that's where we need to see some action being taken. And also a curious thing is that I think when you're talking of this economically weaker sections, they're talking of 8 lakh rupees being the cutoff. It may not really happen, but that's one thought which is coming. Now, if 8 lakhs is something which the government is talking of, naturally exemption limit cannot be where it is, it has to be increased. So these are thoughts which could probably be considered. I don't expect them to be taken up right now at this time, but maybe in a couple of years' time, there could be serious reconsideration per se.
Right. Well, let me welcome Sachin Menon, who's the National Head Indirect Taxes at KPMG India, and also the chairman of the task force on GST. Sachin, we were just looking at the buoyancy that we seem to be seeing in tax revenue at what the economic survey is saying, and we're wondering what that might be signaling for the budget point of view. And obviously, the budget's not going to have much on GST, but other indirect taxes, what would be the major changes you'd be looking at?
Well, I think the trend of GST collection is going up. and it's steady for last almost about 10 months. It is hovering around 1,30,000 crores per month, and this month it is 1,38,000 crore collection. So there are two factors behind this. One is that the government has done a lot of anti-evasion measures, which make it difficult for anybody to evade the tax, because even if they evade, maybe it's a short-lived expectation that they can be found out from the new technology which they are using. So that is one, is that the anti-evasion measures are working. One of the major component is that if you see the wholesale price inflation is somewhere around 14%, because globally the petrol price are going up, the metal price are going up. So there is a global inflation, and that inflation also contributed towards the higher collection of the taxes. It's not just the tax collection mechanism effectiveness alone. So for the first time, maybe the total direct tax collection is less than the indirect tax collection this year, which perhaps may not be a very ideal situation for that matter. But in any case, the government's ability to increase any taxes or introduce any new taxes will be very limited, because it contributes to the inflation. Inflation is already high. The Reserve Bank is talking about a maximum inflation of 3 to 6%, but we are already up 6.8% or something. So therefore, government is not expected to introduce any new taxes in this budget from an indirect tax perspective. As regards customs is concerned, there is a pruning of all this customs notification existing as of today. Many of them have lived its life. Some of them are perhaps no more relevant. Some of them are, in the government's view, is not required. So there is major changes in the customs notification is expected in this budget. From the perspective of the government's thrust would be mainly on infrastructure and capex spending, because they have to kickstart the economy, and so there has to be more demand. Consumer demand is perhaps lesser compared to previous years. That's one of the challenges which we're having. So perhaps if you leave more income in the hands of ordinary people or common people, and also that if you have spending in infrastructure like the roads, highways, etc., that could leave money in the hands of the people, which will kick off the demand, and that would help kickstarting the economy, and the kind of ripple effect of that would be felt all across the economy.
Sachin, how realistic is this expectation of realignment of tax rates in GST, for instance? And if at all there are any opportunities within the tax rates which will allow some kind of trigger as far as consumption is concerned?
See, the government's view is that the recommendation by the Critical Committee was saying that the average tax would be almost about 15%. As of now, we are at 11 to 12%, which is the average GST which we are levied, which is a reasonable rate. And therefore, there was a hue and cry, mainly from the states, requesting the central government and GST Council to review the current rates and consolidate some of the rates and rationalize the slabs, etc., of making a slab in between 12 and 18, and that this kind of recommendations were there. But looking at the buoyancy of revenue collection so far, I really doubt whether that is required at all. There may be some rationalization possible, but not with a eye to increase the revenue, because revenue is all-time high. I think compared to last year, we have a 15% growth over the last year's revenue. So at this point in time, if you increase the taxes, then the inflation will go out of hand, which would be the biggest threat as of today. So I don't anticipate a prudent finance minister may not try and impose or increase the taxes by whatever name you call it, the rationalization or refixing the rate, whatever it is.
All right. All right, Sachin, thanks so much for joining us with that. Rudra Chatterjee joining us as well. Before I come back to Madan Sabnavis on his overall broad expectations from the budget, Rudra, what are you looking ahead at when it comes to the budget?
So, Vikram, this is a great opportunity for exports, and that's what I would like to focus on. What's happening with US demand, what's happening with Chinese tariffs, the scope and scale of what can be done out of Vietnam and Bangladesh. India needs to redouble the export effort. India's export has grown, as you've just heard. It's very buoyant. But looking at the opportunities of exporting, mobile phones, we are manufacturing in India, but exporting electronics, exporting furniture, exporting labor-intensive sectors, which will also be good for employment, but also create a long-term competitive advantage in those products which India can be a world leader in. This is the budget that can establish it and clinch it. I think PLI is a good scheme. We should extend it in several sectors where we want India to be a world leader. I think the lowering of corporate taxes has done well, but there are significant issues in terms of custom duties of raw material versus finished products. There are FTA agreements with countries where we import from, but the raw materials are taxed. So I think those are things that should be fixed in this budget. But this is a great opportunity to make India a goods exporter of consequence.
Madan Sabnavis, if I could just throw that to you before going back to Rajiv. There a lot of people are saying this, that there is a historic opportunity staring at India right now. We're seeing what's happening with supply chains. We're seeing people wanting to perhaps move away from China and figure out what other bases could be. And it is certainly possible, plausible that India can take advantage of that, to become an exporter of consequence, to become a manufacturer of consequence. Do you think that opportunity is there? And what specifically would you like the government to do to take advantage of it?
So definitely this opportunity is there, and it's a fair enough argument to make that given the kind of changes which are taking place in the global economic structure, that India will be in a position to replace or rather compete very well with countries like China. Now, the issue, of course, is we're talking of what kind of goods are we talking of? Are they higher up in the value chain or lower down in the value chain? Because we have seen that when we're talking of products, like say in the textile or your handicrafts in this particular area, we have not actually been we are competing with countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, which Pakistan. So that's one part of the story. But quite clearly, we need to get up in this value chain order and pick up those products and probably become more competitive both in terms of quality and price. So definitely there's a lot of potential which is there, and there is a certain push which could be provided by the government in the budget, and that's more in terms of making sure that the exporters are able to get credit at a reasonable rate, provide the right kind of an infrastructure which is required. And since lots of these exporters also happen to be in the SME segment, I think this continuous thrust on the SMEs is something which would, in the short to medium term, also get us the desired results. So definitely there is a lot of opportunity there for the government to provide this fillip to exports.
But if you look at Madan and Rudra, your thoughts, especially on the fact that exports today, despite all the hike, all the growth that we've seen in the last year, are barely going to be goods exports, barely going to be just about what we were in 2013-14. So, and considering that the economists worldwide are predicting lower GDP growth in the global economy, how much of an opportunity does that provide? Isn't that a bigger challenge, in fact?
I'd like to answer that, Mr. Dubey. You're talking about 2013, 2014. And I'll take the case study of furniture. Furniture was a small-scale industry till 2014. Today, India's total manufacturing of furniture last year was $1 billion. China's furniture industry is $100 billion. Now, there is a tariff on China. that is moving to Vietnam and also Bangladesh. India is no longer a small-scale industry. The furniture sector, there are furniture hubs coming up in different parts of the country. There's opportunity to take this $1 billion to $10 billion. For that, there has to be infrastructure. There has to be we do already work with many of these customers because we are a home textile exporter. So many of the companies that like IKEA and Williams Sonoma who would buy furniture are already coming to India. So we have to just add those goods. This is the same story for example, some agricultural products. India is a massive tea producer, but there is not an Indian brand which is a packaged tea brand, which is exported. So those are areas where can we export value-added agro products, can we export value-added home furnishings products, value-added textile products. Those are the story of 2014 and 2022 quite different in the way the Chinese participation in the export market was.
All right, Rudra, I know Madan has to leave us. Madan, any final thoughts you want to leave us with? I keep asking this every single year for more years than I care to count. One line that you'd like to hear in the budget and one line that you would not like to hear in the budget.
No, what I don't like to hear is any increased taxation. And in terms of what I'd like to hear is fiscal prudence, a path to fiscal prudence, because I think at the end of the day, that's important.
So no new taxes, but still you'd like to see fiscal prudence.
Fiscal prudence, see, the reason I'm emphasizing fiscal prudence is that because higher fiscal deficit leads to more borrowing, it creates a lot of volatility and chaos in the markets. We've already seen that what's happened this year, excess liquidity in the banking system. We don't know how to get rid of it. Now, we don't know in the new situation, government is going to borrow around 12, 13 lakh crores. Private demand for credit is going to go up. So it's going to push up interest rates even further. So that's one reason why I keep harping on fiscal deficit, because it does affect the markets finally.
All right. Madan Sabnavis, thank you so much for joining us. Mukesh Bhutani, I think I saw you briefly, Mukesh, if you're still there, from your car. That's one of the great advantages of doing digital shows, Rajiv, is that you can talk to people anywhere, anytime, just the new tech. So I know he's still in his car, but we're going to get Mukesh back to tell us some of the non-tariff, non-tax ways of really kickstarting the India story. Rudra, on the vision you were laying out, take advantage of the opportunity. We just heard Madan saying what is the existentialist dilemma for every finance minister. Everyone wants a certain amount of spending. There are lots of places to spend. Spend on capex, spend on the poor, spend on XYZ things. No more taxes, because you shouldn't be having more taxes because you don't want to destroy demand. And yet we want fiscal prudence. This is the reason why every finance minister eventually pulls out his or her hair and saying, what do you want me to do? No more taxes, you want more spending, and you want fiscal prudence. How do I do this?
I think obviously every year this is a challenge, but this year I think we need to focus on making investments which will create employment and exports. I think there are opportunities of creating world-class companies in India, world-class industries in India. I think the fiscal deficit will be controlled because of buoyant taxation. I think the big opportunity for India is right now to go head on head in industries where India can be dominant and hold that dominance over many years. In carpet industry, India was a small player compared to China and Turkey. Through significant export-oriented policies, India is now a leader in a $2 billion industry. It may not be much, but 70% of the income goes to villages and as labor income. Similarly, there are many, many industries where India can just pick an industry, give incentives, whether it's made for domestic needs or for exports. For example, in electronics, where we are a significant importer, but many of those products can now, using our IT skills, and if we can add some manufacturing skills, it will not only give jobs to labor, but also to engineers and accountants and other areas where India can become a global player.
All right, Rudra. Mukesh Bhutani, I see you're back. And Mukesh, this is a fantastic way to be doing interviews in the car, although you do have your mask on, so we can't see you. But Mukesh, the dilemma that finance ministers have, we want to kickstart the economy, we want to get the India story going, we want to boost investment and private investment in particular, don't have that much money because I don't want to be hiking taxes. One of the obvious and the logical ways of doing this is to proceed down the path of ease of doing business, make sure that compliances are down, make sure regulations are down, don't have policy flip-flops. All of that goes to create an environment that encourages investment without you necessarily having to throw money at investors. This is something we often talk about in virtually every budget for 15 years. Sometimes things get done, a lot of the times things don't get done. What would you suggest if you had to advise the finance minister?
Well, I think regulatory constraints have always been an impediment for doing business, and those reforms are on a continuing basis being initiated. I would say that there is still scope for improvement, and more scope for improvement at the state level rather than at the federal level. Let me just give you one example. The SEZ law, as it was christened way back in 2005, was far more easy to implement than it has been today. And that's also the reason why the government is looking out for revamping the SEZ law. The entire process of debonding the goods, moving into domestic tariff area, ability to have flexibility to sell goods in the domestic tariff area are some of the examples. But actually, when you get into the deeper into the issue, you realize that there are more hurdles at the relevant SEZ because of bureaucratic hurdles, or at the state level because of local regulations on labor and land. So this is one example. Similarly, there are many, many examples. I know that Niti Aayog and other agencies of the central government initiated process to rank states on ease of doing business, but I think we have had some patchy success on that front. And it's time for us to now carry out the larger message of ease of doing business more at the state level than at the central level. So frankly, budget as an exercise can do very little to help the process, except for realizing that there are certain states which tend to be more attractive for investment, domestic and foreign, than the other states.
Mr. Bhutani, one of the biggest challenges right now in the economy, it seems, is the job creation. Apart from the fact that we need to accelerate growth, what do you reckon can be the measures which can bring about you know greater job opportunities for the youth and even for the people who may have lost their jobs in the last year and a half?
It's partly got to do with deeper reforms on education, particularly vocational education, and partly got to do with creating more jobs outside of the urban areas. And a large part of that responsibility falls on the state. But I think the central government does have a role to play. I don't know whether I carry that perception true or not true, but we seem to be focusing largely on manufacturing jobs. If there is more impetus given to jobs in the services sector, if there is more impetus given to creation of jobs in the new economy, new age companies, particularly startups, then I think we will do well. For the startup ecosystem, a lot has been done, but I think there is greater leeway for us to create more employment at the startup ecosystem than at the traditional manufacturing system. The other sector where there is opportunity for job creation is agro processing. We all know from the statistics where we lie insofar as the agriculture and the fruit processing industry is concerned. And this will also make sure that the job creation happens outside of the urban areas. So I would say agro processing, small and medium enterprise, the new startup ecosystem, and the larger services sector, rather than being obsessed about creating jobs only in the manufacturing sector.
All right, Mukesh, I mean, just welcome Shailesh Pathak, who's the co-chairman of the FICCI Committee on Transport Infrastructure, and also head special initiatives development projects at Larsen and Toubro, which of course will be hoping, and this time there may be good reason to hope, for a considerable amount of announcements on infrastructure pipelines, infrastructure spending. Is that something, Mr. Pathak, you think is going to be happening? Is this one of the best ways of kickstarting the economy, maybe kickstarting jobs as well? And maybe this time there is the finance, given the buoyancy of tax revenue, there may be the fiscal space to actually go out and have a whole bunch of spending.
Absolutely. Running from the last year's union budget, which was very, very good for infrastructure, we expect this year's budget to go further. And, since we were talking about job creation, construction, which includes both infrastructure and real estate, is the one sector that can absorb a whole lot of unskilled labor, which needs to move out of agriculture and into manufacturing and services. So we expect a large boost to construction in general. And in terms of infrastructure, the four N's that we have seen over the last 18 months, the National Infrastructure Pipeline, the National Monetization Pipeline, the National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development, as well as the NPMFF, the National Policy and Project Management Framework, how it's all going to get done. So we expect the union budget in half an hour to focus even more on infrastructure. That's one surefire way of getting the economy back on track. Thank you.
You're on a very good wicket in that sense, Mr. Pathak, because the only areas in which the government is spending, it seems to be on infrastructure. The capex spending is on infrastructure. But both and this time, the last time that we met the finance minister, she was actually saying that health infrastructure is going to be another big initiative this time. Now, the point I wanted to make is that despite all the announcements and all the discussions that have been happening around infrastructure, highway construction is actually slowing down. Even highway project awards have slowed down. So what really is behind this? On one side, the kind of announcements that we are making, the kind of intent that we are showing on infrastructure development, and yet on ground things are not playing up, despite the fact that obviously there has been an impact of COVID, but we are talking of 2021 versus 21-22. So COVID impact was equally bad last year.
That's a fair point. And the question is, how do we, given the money and the planning, how do we execute on ground very, very effectively and at speed and scale? And the answer is, let me start with our success story. Actually, three. The biggest success story that we've had over the last 2.5 years is the Jal Jeevan Mission, where 1 in 6 women in rural India had tap water. Now 3 out of 6 have tap water. And in the next 2 years, 6 out of 6 will have tap water. That's actually amazing. The second success story I talk about is the Purvanchal Expressway. Quietly, the state of Uttar Pradesh is become the expressway capital in the country. And the third is the Delhi-Mumbai Expressway. So very soon we'll be able to travel between Delhi and Mumbai in less than 15 hours. Our company has delivered a 13-kilometer metro project in Mauritius in less than 2 years, concept to commissioning. So how to do it is actually well defined. It is the pre-construction activities. And that's why if I have a wish list for the union budget, it is 4 C's. The first is coordination. The way Government of India's departments have started coordinating amongst themselves, including the Gati Shakti mission. Same coordination is required at the state and the city level. The second is actually capacity. You talked about highway construction. NHAI has the capacity to deliver 40 kilometers, but state PWDs do not. How do we get the similar capacity into municipal bodies of effective infrastructure? And the third is a lot of our headache is in contract and dispute resolution. So I think given the amount of construction we are doing, it is time for India to go for a specific construction law, learning from advanced economies. Thank you.
I think those are all excellent ideas. Just hold that thought. We can discuss them. We have about 15 minutes to go till the finance minister starts to speak. So, time to sort of get our final wish list in. Not that she can do anything about it right now, even if she thinks one of you comes up with a great idea. But hey, that doesn't hurt to ask. Mukesh Bhutani is back in a slightly different surroundings to the car he was in a short while back. And PM Vijay joining us. PM Vijay, who's been, really looking at the budget of the markets and also was, closely advising the BJP on economic matters still not that long ago. P.N. Vijay, I'm looking at the markets right now, which are up and up rather nicely, 217 points in the Nifty, Sensex up. So it's been a bad month or so, but there's a bounce back which has been happening the last couple of days, helped no doubt by that rather spectacular rally that we saw last night on the Nasdaq, and in American markets, tech stocks just sort of took off once again yesterday after being beaten down for a while. What would be your market expectations before we come to anything else?
Well, I think India was part of a worldwide sell-off earlier this month, with the techies leading the route because of the tightening by the Fed, and it's a time-bound basis. The Fed had announced that it was going to tighten, so the FPIs were pulling big money out of emerging markets, and India also got affected. There was nothing local about the. Right now, I think the market is looking at the budget with a certain amount of anxiety, in the sense that the fact that the COVID third wave has practically over and we are back to business in a way has been in a way discounted by the market last 3-4 days. So the growth story sort of limping back is not going to add incrementally to the market. I think the market, where it's looking at, is it wants some signs from the government that the fiscal space that the economic survey sort of boasted about. I thought personally it was a very too much of a feel-good factor survey, but that's another story. The fiscal space would be used by the government to probably put some money back in the hands of the people. Clearly, as Amit Mitra pointed out a few days ago, we need, there is a huge, and I think Times of India pointed out in an editorial this morning, there's a clear demand and consumption lag or gap in the Indian story. And willingly, the government has sucked the people dry with its high taxes. For example, the middle class has become the whipping boy of the government and has been badly affected by the COVID, and hasn't got anything in return in the last 2 years except higher and higher price of diesel and petrol. So I think the government, in its own interest, in the interest of the market, because what does the market want to see, Vikram? You and I have been in this for a long time. They want to see sales numbers going up. They want to see demand going up. They want to see consumption going up. We brought down the taxes for the corporate sector to 25%, but they didn't invest a dime in the economy. And a survey admits that the private investment is a very nascent stage. All the private sector is saying is, government, please invest more. Government, please invest more and give us more contracts. But private sector is, in its bones, feeling there is not demand revival, consumption revival in the economy. So what the government needs to do is use this fiscal space that's available to actually give some money back to the middle class through increase the level of exemptions to probably 5 lakhs. And another thing, the savers in this economy have been brutalized in the last 2 years, Vikram. Today, the bank rates are 5% per year and the inflation is 6.5%. I haven't seen this last 20 years. I think you need to bring more tax ops for interest earnings, etc. Generally, put more money. Once you put money into the hands of a guy who is earning 50,000 rupees a month, I'm sure he'll go out and spend it. And all the companies would benefit from that. And there'll be more investment. If you tax him more and more and take away more of his money and build various infrastructure, grandiose projects, there's not going to be any consumption in the economy, isn't it? So market's looking. And I think if we get that, we'll see a good boom in the good old FMCG stocks. People will again start buying liver and this, that, etc., which makes me feel good because they're buying the economy.
All right, 10 minutes to go. So, Rajiv, with your permission, I'm going to start playing traffic policeman to try and go quickly, so we get as many comments in as we can just before the finance minister speaks in 10 minutes. Very quickly to every one of you, getting the feel-good factor back and keeping it going. Shailesh, don't spend too much on grandiose projects, what P. N. Vijay said. Put money into the hands of people and allow them to spend. In long term, that will be a better idea, which could mean...
Well, I respect that perspective. The only thing is that these projects that we are talking about actually employ very poor people. And the construction labor, I wish I had my yellow jacket. Those are the people who benefit from these grandiose projects. And let me just suggest that the Purvanchal Expressway has connected Eastern UP, but that is going to lead to 10 times the private investment in the area connected by the Purvanchal Expressway. So that is why the multiplier effect of infrastructure. And you know, it is all very well, but there is something called a Say's law, which means you have to have purchasing power to generate demand. I'll rest there.
Okay, PN Vijay wants to say something very quickly to rebut
Yeah,
that.
I think this is the story that we all get. Look at the statistics, man. In the last 8 years, the share of employment by the manufacturing and services sector, which is now 80% of the economy, has remained stagnant. Every time we are given this Reaganomics, the supply chain, this trickle down bullshit. It's not worked. It's not
Okay.
worked. See the statistics. See, after 1991, Vikram, has manufacturing produced any jobs? They
Okay.
haven't. The labor participation rate in
Pause
India
that
is
thought.
40%, which is the lowest in the world.
Okay, this is traffic policeman Chandra pressing the pause button.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mukesh Bhutani, radical new thought to throw into this entire mix.
Yeah.
It's not, if you really wanted to kickstart private sector investment, why is it that despite all the South's private sector is not investing or big semiconductor plants aren't coming in? It's not to do with all of this only. It's also to do with the hassle, the head tape, the red tape that there is, ease of doing business. Still work is required there. You need to assure people you'll have consistent policies, and you won't put up a semiconductor plant today and have somebody coming in questioning it 4 years down the line.
Vikram, I'm not someone who believes that growth should be driven by government expenditure. However, given where the confidence level of the private sector is and the shrewdest of businesses that we have, whether in large, small, or medium enterprises, it is the government that has to take the lead. And hence, the infrastructure is a big story. I think the government should, in my view, look at expanding the fisc and looking at spending more, because that's what is going to give the private sector the confidence. As far as private sector is concerned, I think the growth is going to be driven more by areas and industries where there are opportunities. SEZ manufacturing I mentioned is a low-hanging fruit, and I think the government ought to do something to ease the controls. And that's, in my view, the key. Attracting greater degree of foreign direct investment. Foreign investors still see India as a market which is restrictive, still see India from a regulatory standpoint as a country where there is a lot to be done on certainty front. And I think if those roadblocks are addressed, you would see increased investment, and that's why it's going to push the all-round confidence of the private sector.
Okay, one vote infrastructure spending so far, one vote give money directly into the hands of people, two votes so far on give people certainty of doing business and ease of doing business. Rajiv, before I get your vote in, Rudra, what would you vote? You're the finance minister. You want to really kickstart the India story in the next 2 hours. What would you
I
do?
think one point about manufacturing and jobs, the reason it probably had a lot of challenges, there are a few areas. One was the cost of capital, cost of electricity, the cost of logistics, the high corporate tax rate. Now, when you have a choice of making a product in Thailand and bringing it duty-free into India versus making it in India, there's a logistics cost, electricity cost, corporate tax. Now, two or three of those things have been reduced.
Okay.
We just need to keep at it and make sure that we are as competitive as the Southeast Asian countries for manufacturing. India will continue growing in a way that Vietnam cannot, because they are just not as big a country with as much of a labor pool, as much of capital intensity. So I think we just need to keep focusing and not give up on making India into a manufacturing power for exports and becoming globally competitive. I think we've started the journey well, and we need to keep at it.
Large economy, so you will eventually do well, drive down the cost of the various factors of production and work a little bit on the supply side. Rajiv, you're the finance minister. What would you say to kickstart that story in the next 2 hours?
So Vikram, without doubt, capex. Everybody has been saying that, and without doubt, I think that's the only engine that is working right now, keeping the economy afloat. Capex, both roads, and as the finance minister told Fortune India in a special exclusive that she's also going to be focusing on health capex. So health infrastructure is going to be the next big priority, apart from road building and public capex. My only difference with Mr. Chatterjee, with due respect, is that while our exports, as he's suggesting, you should go for guerrilla warfare as far as exports are concerned, go for specific areas where we are developing new capabilities. We are going to have a checkered future in exports, because while that is happening, there are other sectors like automobiles where we are going to be suffering. So exports especially is going to be a big worry, because the global economy is projected to go down and not grow as significantly as it was projected. And so the consumption to which is linked the private investment needs to be the big priority. And consumption, as we have been discussing, will not happen unless there is greater leeway as far as the middle class is concerned. And so I think that needs to be addressed in this budget for sure.
All right, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes to go. So Mukesh Bhutani, one line that you would like to hear in the budget and one line you would like not to hear.
One line that I would not like to hear in the budget is any form of broad basing the tax net. Today I saw speculation about wealth tax. I think it's regressive, even if you try and tax the billionaires, because it's going to throw the sentiment wrong. One thing that I'd like to hear is rationalization of tax rates. I don't see any reason why the manufacturing and the services sector should be discriminated. Everything should be flat at 25%, which is the basic rate.
Right. Before I come to PN Vijay, just to let you, I mean, the placard is already up there. We can maybe show it to you. So you are confident that as soon as she starts to speak, we will cut to it. Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, about her speech is about to start. PN Vijay, one line you would like to hear, one line you would like not to hear.
One line I'd like not to hear is some quotation from some little-known poet.
You're going to hear it. You are going to hear it.
One line I'd like to hear is that the government has decided now the time has come to put more money into the hands of the people and leave it to them to spend and boost this economy.
Okay, Shailesh Pathak, one line you would like to hear, and one line you
hope. I'd like to hear that this is a budget not only for Maharashtra but also for Bihar.
Okay, fine. And
one line I would not want to hear is, any reduction of capital expenditure and giving people money in their hand. If we only gave money instead of taps to rural women, what do you think would have happened?
All right, fine. Rajiv, one line you would like to hear, one line you hope you don't hear.
Vikram, one line that I would like to hear, and we've been wanting to hear for 3 years, is something to do with cryptocurrency. Clear direction for the cryptocurrency business, because that's where a lot of money is going in without anybody knowing what's the future. That is one. The second one is about new taxes, which I would not like to hear. So I think that's where my 2 lines would be.
All right, I think we can start going across to Parliament, where I can see the speakers just walked inside, so we can just quickly take you across to Parliament. But PN Vijay, while we are doing that, cryptocurrency, is that the one big thing you might be keeping your eyes out for?
I think it's the elephant in the room. We cannot just deny its existence. I think Rajiv is perfectly right. We need to talk about it and treat it probably like any other asset. I mean, don't treat it like a share market asset or something like that, but treat it like any other asset. Why are we so sort of scared of talking about it? I think RBI started talking about it. I hope, as Rajiv says, we get some steps towards the legislation on the subject.
All right, we're seeing, Lok Sabha. There she is. The finance minister started to speak, so I'm just going to toss across to her.
Honorable Speaker, sir, I present the budget for the year 2022-23. At the outset, sir, I want to take a moment to express my empathy for those who had to bear adverse health and economic effects of the pandemic. The overall sharp rebound and recovery of the economy is reflective of our country's strong resilience. India's economic growth in the current year is estimated to be 9.2%, highest among all large economies. I recognize we are in the midst of an Omicron wave with high incidence but milder symptoms. Further, the speed and coverage of our vaccination campaign has helped greatly. With an accelerated improvement of health infrastructure in the past 2 years, we are in a strong position to withstand challenges. I am confident that with Sabka Prayas, we will continue our journey with strong growth. Honorable Speaker, we are marking Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav and have entered into Amrit Kal, the 25-year-long lead-up to India at 100. Honorable Prime Minister, in his Independence Day address, had set out the vision for India at 100. By achieving certain goals during Amrit Kal, our government aims to attain this vision. They are complementing the macroeconomic level growth focus with a microeconomic level all-inclusive welfare focus, promoting digital economy and fintech, technology-enabled development, energy transition, and climate action, and relying on virtuous cycle starting from private investment with public capital investment, helping to crowd in private investment. Since 2014, our government's focus has been on empowerment of citizens, especially the poor and the marginalized. Measures have included programs that have provided housing, electricity, cooking gas, and access to water. We also have programs for ensuring financial inclusion and direct benefit transfers. We are committed to strengthening the abilities of the poor to tap all opportunities. Our government constantly strives to provide the necessary ecosystem for the middle classes, a vast and wide section which is populated across various middle-income brackets, to make use of the opportunities they so desire. This budget seeks to lay the foundation and give a blueprint to steer the economy over Amrit Kal of the next 25 years, from India at 75 to India at 100. It continues to build on the vision drawn in the budget of 21-22. Its fundamental tenets, which included transparency of financial statement and fiscal position, reflect the government's intent, strengths, and challenges. This continues to guide us. The initiatives of the last year's budget have seen significant progress and have been provided with adequate allocations in this budget as well. The strengthening of health infrastructure, speedy implementation of the vaccination program, and the nationwide resilient response to the current wave of the pandemic are evident for all. The productivity-linked incentive in 14 sectors for achieving the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat has received excellent response, with potential to create 60 lakh new jobs and an additional production of 30 lakh crore during next 5 years. Towards implementation of the new public sector enterprise policy, the strategic transfer of ownership of Air India has been completed. The strategic partner for Neelanchal Ispat Nigam Limited has been selected. The public issue of the LIC is expected shortly. Others too are in the process for 2022-23. The National Bank The National Bank for Infrastructure Development and National Asset Reconstruction Company have commenced their activities. Honorable Speaker, sir, Budget 2021-22 had provided a sharp increase in provision for public investment or capital expenditure. Throughout the year, with the Honorable Prime Minister guiding the implementation, our economic recovery is continuing to benefit from the multiplier effect. This budget continues to provide impetus for growth. It lays a parallel track of 1. A blueprint for the Amrit Kal, which is futuristic and inclusive. This will directly benefit our youth, women, farmers, the scheduled castes, and the scheduled tribes. And number 2, big private public investment. Number 2, big public investment for modern infrastructure, readying for India at 100. This shall be guided by PM Gati Shakti and be benefited by the synergy of multimodal approach. Moving forward on this parallel track, we lay the following 4 priorities: PM Gati Shakti, inclusive development, productivity enhancement and investment, sunrise opportunities, energy transition, and climate action, and 4, financing of investments. PM Gati Shakti. PM Gati Shakti is a transformative approach for economic growth and sustainable development. The approach is driven by 7 engines, namely roads, railways, airports, ports, mass transport, waterways, and logistics infrastructure. All 7 engines will pull forward the economy in unison. These engines are supported by the complementary roles of energy transmission, IT communication, bulk water and sewerage, and social infrastructure. Finally, the approach is powered by clean energy and Sabka Prayas. The efforts of the central government, the state governments, and the private sector together, leading to a huge job and entrepreneurial opportunities for all, especially the youth. PM Gati Shakti Master Plan, National Master Plan. The scope of PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan will encompass the 7 engines for economic transformation, seamless multimodal connectivity, and logistics efficiency. It will also include the infrastructure development by the state governments as per Gati Shakti Master Plan. The focus will be on planning, financing, including through innovative ways, use of technology, and speedier implementation. The projects pertaining to these 7 engines in the national infrastructure pipeline will be aligned with PM Gati Shakti framework. The touchstone of the master plan will be world-class modern infrastructure and logistics synergy among different modes of movement, both of people and goods, and location of projects. This will help raise the productivity and accelerate economic growth and development. Road transport. PM Gati Shakti Master Plan for expressways will be formulated in 22-23 to facilitate faster movement of people and goods. The national highways network will be expanded by 25,000 kilometers in 2022-23. 20,000 crores of rupees will be mobilized through innovative ways of financing to complement the public resources. The data exchange among all mode operators will be brought on unified logistics interface platform, designed for application programming interface. This will provide for efficient movement of goods through different modes, reducing logistics cost and time, assisting just-in-time inventory management, and in eliminating tedious documentation. Most importantly, this will provide real-time information to all stakeholders and improve international competitiveness. Open source mobility stack for organizing seamless travel of passengers will also be facilitated. Contracts for implementation of multimodal logistic parks at 4 locations through PPP mode will be awarded in 22-23. Railways will develop new products and efficient logistics services for small farmers and small and medium enterprises, besides taking the lead in integration of postal and railways network to provide seamless solutions for movement of parcels. One station, one product concept will be popularized to help local businesses and supply chains. As a part of Atmanirbhar Bharat, 2,000 kilometers of network will be brought under Kavach, the indigenous world-class technology for safety and capacity augmentation in 2022-23. 400 new generation Vande Bharat trains will better energy efficiency and passenger riding experience will be developed and manufactured during the next 3 years. 100 PM Gati Shakti cargo terminals for multimodal logistics facilities will be developed during the next 3 years. Innovative ways of financing and faster implementation will be encouraged for building metro systems of appropriate type at scale. Multimodal connectivity between mass urban transport and railway stations will be facilitated on priority. Design of metro systems, including civil structures, will be reoriented and standardized for Indian conditions and needs. Parvat Mala, as a preferred ecologically sustainable alternative to conventional roads in difficult hilly areas, National Ropeways Development Program will be taken up on PPP mode. The aim is to improve connectivity and convenience for commuters, besides promoting tourism. This may also cover congested urban areas where conventional mass transit system is not feasible. Contracts for 8 such ropeway projects for a length of 60 kilometers will be awarded in 22-23. With technical support from the Capacity Building Commission, central ministries, state governments, and their infra agencies will have their skills upgraded. This will ramp up capacity in planning, design, financing, including innovative ways, and implementation management of the PM Gati Shakti infrastructure projects. Inclusive development, our second priority. Agriculture. The procurement of wheat in Rabi 21-22 and the estimated procurement of paddy in Kharif 21-22 will cover 1,208 lakh metric tons of wheat and paddy from 163 lakh farmers, and 2.37 lakh crores will be the direct payment of MSP value to their accounts. Chemical-free natural farming will be promoted throughout the country with a focus on farmers' lands in 5-kilometer wide corridors along the river Ganga at the first stage. 2023 has been announced as the International Year of Millets. Support will be provided for post-harvest value addition, enhancing domestic consumption, and for branding millet products nationally and internationally. To reduce our dependence on import of oil seeds, a rationalized and comprehensive scheme to increase domestic production of oil seeds will be implemented. For delivery of digital and high-tech services to farmers, with involvement of public sector research and extension institutions, along with private agri-tech players and stakeholders of agri-value chains, a scheme in PPP mode will be launched. Use of Kisan drones will be promoted for crop assessment, digitization of land records, spraying of insecticides and nutrients. States will be encouraged to revise syllabi of agricultural universities to meet the needs of natural, zero budget, and organic farming, modern day agriculture, value addition, and management. A fund with blended capital raised under the co-investment model will be facilitated through the NABARD. This is to finance startups for agriculture and rural enterprise relevant for farm produce value chain. The activities of these startups will include inter alia, support for FPOs, machinery for farmers on rental basis at farm level, and technology including IT-based support. The implementation of the Ken-Betwa link project at an estimated cost of 44,605 crores will be taken up. This is aimed at providing irrigation benefits to 9.0 lakh hectare of farmers' lands, drinking water supply to 62 lakh people, 103 megawatt of hydro, 27 megawatt of solar power, allocations of 4,300 crores of rupees in the RE 21-22 and 1,400 crores of rupees in 22-23 have been made for this project. Honorable Speaker, sir, draft DPRs for 5 river links, namely Daman-Ganga Pinjal, Par-Tapi Narmada, Godavari Krishna, Krishna Pennar, and Pennar Kaveri have been finalized. Once a consensus is reached among the beneficiary states, the center will provide support for their implementation. For farmers to adopt suitable varieties of fruits and vegetables and to use appropriate production and harvesting techniques, our government will provide a comprehensive package with participation of state governments. MSMEs, Udyam, eShram, NCS, and ASEAN portals will be interlinked. Their scope will be widened. They will now perform as portals with live organic databases, providing G2C, B2C, and B2B services. These services will relate to credit facilitation, skilling, and recruitment with an aim to further formalize the economy and enhance entrepreneurial opportunities for all. Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme has provided the much needed additional credit to more than 130 lakh MSMEs. This has helped them mitigate the adverse impact of the pandemic. The hospitality and related services, especially those by micro and small enterprises, are yet to regain their pre-pandemic level of business. Considering these aspects, the ECLGS will be extended up to March 2023, and its guarantee cover will be expanded by 50,000 crores of rupees to total cover of 5 lakh crores. With the additional amount being earmarked exclusively for the hospitality and related sectors. Credit Guarantee Trust for Micro and Small Enterprises, CGT-MSE, scheme will be revamped with required infusion of funds. This will facilitate additional credit of 2 lakh crore for micro and small enterprises and expand employment opportunities. Raising and accelerating MSME performance, RAMP, program will outlay of 6,000 crore over 5 years will be rolled out. This will help MSME sector become more resilient, competitive, and efficient. Skilling programs and partnership with the industry will be reoriented to promote continuous skilling avenues, sustainability, and employability. The National Skill Qualification Framework will be aligned with dynamic industry needs. Digital ecosystem for skilling and livelihood, the Desh Stack e-portal, will be launched. This aims to empower citizens to skill, reskill, or upskill through online training. It will also provide API-based trusted skill credentials, payment and discovery layers to find relevant jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities. Startups will be promoted to facilitate Drone Shakti through varied applications and for drone as a service. In select ITIs in all states, the required courses for skilling will be started. Due to the pandemic-induced closure of schools, our children, particularly in the rural areas and those from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and other weaker sections, have lost almost 2 years of formal education. Mostly, these are children in government schools. We recognize the need to impart supplementary teaching and to build a resilient mechanism for education delivery. For this purpose, One Class, One TV channel program of PM eVidya will be expanded from 12 to 200 TV channels. This will enable all states to provide supplementary education in regional languages for classes 1 to 12. High-quality e-content in all spoken languages will be developed for delivery via internet, mobile phones, TV, and through radio and digital teachers. A competitive mechanism for development of quality e-content by the teachers will be set up to empower and equip them with digital tools of teaching and facilitate better learning outcomes. A digital university will be established to provide access to students across the country for world-class quality universal education with personalized learning experience at their doorsteps. This will be made available in different Indian languages and ICT formats. The university will be built on a networked hub and spoke model, with the hub building cutting-edge ICT expertise. The best public universities and institutions in the country will collaborate as a network of hub and spoke. An open platform for the national digital health ecosystem will be rolled out. It will consist of digital registries of health providers and health facilities, unique health identity, consent framework, and universal access to health facilities. The pandemic has accentuated mental health problems in people of all ages. To better the access to quality mental health counseling and care services, a national tele-mental health program will be launched. This will include a network of 23 tele-mental health centers of excellence, with NIMHANS being the nodal center, and International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore, IIIT Bangalore, providing technology support. Recognizing the importance of Nari Shakti as the harbinger of our bright future and for women-led development, during the Amrit Kal, our government has comprehensively revamped the schemes of the Ministry of Women and Child Development. Accordingly, 3 schemes, namely Mission Shakti, Mission Vatsalya, Saksham Anganwadi and Poshan 2.0 were launched recently to provide integrated benefits to women and children. Saksham Anganwadis are a new generation Anganwadis that have better infrastructure and audio-visual aids, powered by clean energy and providing improved environment for early childhood development. 2 lakh Anganwadis will be upgraded under this scheme. Current coverage of Har Ghar Nal Se Jal is 8.7 crores. Of this, 5.5 crore households were provided tap water in last 2 years itself. Allocation of 60,000 crores of rupees has been made with an aim to cover 3.8 crore households in 2022 and 23. In 22-23, 80 lakh houses will be completed for the identified eligible beneficiaries of the PM Awas Yojana, both rural and urban. 48,000 crores is allotted for this purpose. The central government will work with the state governments for reduction of time required for all land and construction related approvals, for promoting affordable housing for middle class and for the economically weaker sections in urban areas. We shall also work with the financial sector, regulators, to expand access to capital along with reduction in cost of intermediaries. A new scheme, Prime Minister's Development Initiative for the Northeast, will be implemented through the Northeastern Council. It will fund infrastructure in the spirit of PM Gati Shakti and social development projects based on felt needs of the Northeast. This will enable livelihood activities for youth and women, filling the gaps in various sectors. It will not be a substitute for existing central or state schemes. While the central ministries may also post their candidate projects, priority will be given to those posted by the states. An initial allocation of 1,500 crores of rupees will be made, and the initial list of projects is given in Annexure 1 of my speech. Our vision to improve the quality of life of citizens in the most backward districts of the country through Aspirational Districts program has been translated into reality in a very short span of time. 95% of those 112 districts have made significant progress in key sectors such as health, nutrition, financial inclusion, and basic infrastructure. They have surpassed even some of the state average values. However, in those districts, some blocks continue to lag. In 22-23, the program will focus on such blocks in those districts. Border villages with sparse population, limited connectivity, and infrastructure often get left out from the development gains. Such villages on the northern border will be covered under a new Vibrant Villages program. The activities will include construction of village infrastructure, housing, tourist centers, road connectivity, provisioning of decentralized renewable energy, direct-to-home access for Doordarshan and educational channels, and support for their livelihood generation. Additional funding for these activities will be provided. Existing schemes will be converged. We will define their outcomes and monitor them on a constant basis. In 2022, 100% of 1.5 lakh post offices will come on the core banking system, enabling financial inclusion and access to accounts through net banking, mobile banking, ATMs, and also provide online transfer of funds between post office accounts and bank accounts. This will be helpful, especially for farmers and senior citizens in rural areas, enabling interoperability and financial inclusion. Honorable Speaker, sir, in recent years, digital banking, digital payments, and fintech innovations have grown at a rapid pace in the country. Government is continuously encouraging these sectors to ensure that the benefits of digital banking reach every nook and corner of the country in a consumer-friendly manner. Taking forward this agenda and to mark 75 years of our independence, it is proposed to set up 75 digital banking units in 75 districts of the country by scheduled commercial banks. The financial support for digital payment ecosystem announced in the previous budget will continue in 22-23 as well. This will encourage further adoption of digital payments. There will also be a focus to promote use of payment platforms that are economical and user-friendly. Sir, I move to the next priority. In recent years, over 25,000 compliances were reduced and nearly 1,500 union laws were repealed. This is the result of our government's strong commitment for minimum government and maximum governance. 1,486 union laws were repealed. Our trust in the public and ease of doing business is what is highlighted here, sir. For the Amrit Kal, the next phase of ease of doing business 2.0 and ease of living will be launched. In our endeavor to improve productive efficiency of capital and human resources, we will follow the idea of trust-based governance. The new phase will be guided by an active involvement of the states, digitization of manual processes and interventions, integration of the central and state level systems through IT bridges, a single point access for all citizen-centric services, and standardization and removal of overlapping compliances. Crowdsourcing of suggestions and ground-level assessment of the impact with active involvement of citizens and businesses will be encouraged. A single window portal, Parivesh, for all green clearances was launched in 2018. It has been instrumental in reducing the time required for approvals significantly. The scope of this portal will be expanded to provide information to the applicants based on location of units. Information about specific approvals will be provided. It will enable application for all 4 approvals through a single form and tracking of the process through Centralized Processing Center Green, CPC Green. E-passports. The issuance of e-passports using embedded chip and futuristic technology will be rolled out in 22-23 to enhance the convenience for the citizens in their overseas travel. By the time of India at 100, nearly half our population is likely to be living in urban areas. To prepare for this, orderly urban development is of critical importance. This will help realize the country's economic potential, including livelihood opportunities for the demographic dividend. For this, on the one hand, we need to nurture the megacities and their hinterlands to become current centers of economic growth. On the other, we need to facilitate Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities to take on the mantle in the future. This would require us to reimagine our cities into centers of sustainable living with opportunities for all, including women and our youth. For this to happen, urban planning cannot continue with a business as usual approach. We plan to steer a paradigm change. A high-level committee of reputed urban planners, urban economists, and institutions will be formed to make recommendations on urban sector policies, capacity building, planning, implementation, and governance. For urban capacity building, support will be provided to the states. Modernization of building bylaws, town planning schemes, transit-oriented development will be implemented. This will facilitate reforms for people to live and work closer to the mass transit systems. The central government's financial support for mass transit projects and Amrit scheme will be leveraged for formulation of action plans and their implementation for facilitating the TOD and TPS by the states. For developing India-specific knowledge in urban planning and design, and to deliver certified training in these areas, up to 5 existing academic institutions in different regions will be designated as centers of excellence. These centers will be provided endowment fund of 250 crore each. In addition, the AICTE will take the lead to improve syllabi, quality and access of urban planning courses in other institutions. We will promote a shift to use of public transport in urban areas. This will be complemented by clean tech and governance solutions, special mobility zones with zero fossil fuel policy and EV vehicles. Battery swapping policy. Considering the constraint of space in urban areas, for setting up charging stations at scale, a battery swapping policy will be brought out and interoperability standards will be formulated. The private sector will be encouraged to develop sustainable and innovative business models for battery or energy as a service. This will improve efficiency in the EV ecosystem. Efficient use of land resources is a strong imperative. States will be encouraged to adopt unique land parcel identification number to facilitate IT-based management of records. The facility for transliteration of land records across any of the Schedule 8 languages will also be rolled out. The adoption of linkage with National Generic Document Registration System, NGDRS, with the One Nation, One Registration software will be promoted as an option for uniform process of registration and anywhere registration of deeds and documents. Necessary amendments in the code IBC will be carried out to enhance the efficiency of the resolution process and facilitate cross-border insolvency resolution. Accelerated corporate exit. Several IT-based systems have been established for accelerated registration of new companies. Now the Center for Processing Accelerated Corporate Exit, CPACE, will process re-engineering, will be established to facilitate and speed up the voluntary winding up of these companies from the currently required 2 years to to less than 6 months. Government procurement. Government rules have recently been modernized for the needs of Amritkal. The new rules have benefited from the inputs from various stakeholders. The modernized rules allow use of transparent quality criteria besides cost and evaluation of complex tenders. Provisions have been made for payment of 75% of running bills mandatorily within 10 days and for encouraging settlements of disputes through conciliation. As a further step to enhance transparency and to reduce delays in payments, a completely paperless, end-to-end online e-bill system will be launched for use by all central ministries for their procurements. The system will enable the suppliers and contractors to submit online their digitally signed bills and claims and track their status from anywhere. To reduce indirect cost for suppliers and work contractors, the use of surety bonds as a substitute for bank guarantee will be made acceptable in government procurements. Business such as gold imports may also find this useful. IRDAI, insurance regulator, has given the framework for issue of surety bonds by insurance companies. AVGC Promotion Task Force. The animation, visual effects, gaming, and comic, the AVGC sector, offers immense potential to employ youth. An AVGC Promotion Task Force with all stakeholders will be set up to recommend ways to realize this and build domestic capacity for serving our markets and the global demand. Telecom sector. Telecommunications in general and 5G technology in particular can enable growth and offer job opportunities. Required spectrum auctions will be conducted in 2022 to facilitate rollout of 5G's mobile services within 2022-23 by private telecom providers. A scheme for design-led manufacturing will be launched to build a strong ecosystem for 5G as part of the production-linked incentive scheme. To enable affordable broadband and mobile service proliferation in rural and remote areas, 5% of annual collections under the Universal Service Obligation Fund will be allocated. This will provide and this will promote R&D and commercialization of technologies and solutions. Our vision is that all villages and their residents should have the same access to e-services, communication facilities, and digital resources as urban areas and their residents. The contracts for laying optical fiber in all villages, including remote areas, will be awarded under the BharatNet project through PPP in 22 and 23. Completion is expected in 2025. Measures will be taken to enable better and more efficient use of the optical fiber. Export promotion. The Special Economic Zones Act will be replaced with a new legislation that will enable the states to become partners in development of enterprise and service hubs. This will cover all large existing and new industrial enclaves to optimally utilize available infrastructure and enhance competitiveness of exports. Atmanirbharta in defense. Our government is committed to reducing imports and promoting Atmanirbharta in equipment for the armed forces. 68% of the capital procurement budget will be earmarked for domestic industry in 22-23, up from 58% in 21-22. Defense R&D will be opened up for industry, startups, and academia, with 25% of defense R&D budget earmarked. Private industry will be encouraged to take up design and development of military platforms and equipment in collaboration with DRDO and other organizations through SPV model. An independent nodal umbrella body will be set up for meeting wide-ranging testing and certification requirements. Artificial intelligence, geospatial systems and drones, semiconductor and its ecosystem, space economy, genomics and pharmaceuticals, green energy and clean mobility systems have immense potential to assist sustainable development at scale and modernize the country. They provide employment opportunities for our youth and make Indian industry more efficient and competitive. Supportive policies, light touch regulations, facilitative actions to build domestic capacities and promotion of research and development will guide the government's approach. For R&D in the sunrise opportunities, in addition to efforts of collaboration among academia, industry and public institutions, government contribution will be provided. Energy transition and climate change. The risks of climate change are the strongest negative externalities that affect India and other countries. As Honorable Prime Minister said at the COP26 summit in Glasgow last November, and I quote, "What is needed today is mindful and deliberate utilization instead of mindless, destructive consumption," unquote. The low-carbon development strategy, as enunciated in the Panchamrit that he announced is an important reflection of our government's strong commitment towards sustainable development. The strategy opens up huge employment opportunities and will take the country on a sustainable development path. This budget proposes several near-term and long-term actions accordingly. Solar power. To facilitate domestic manufacturing for the ambitious goal of 280 gigawatts of installed solar capacity by 2030, an additional allocation of 19,500 crores for PLI, production-linked incentive, for manufacturing of high-efficiency modules with priority to fully integrate manufacturing units from polysilicon to solar PV modules will be made. Honorable Speaker, sir, the circular economy transition is expected to help in productivity enhancement as well as creating large opportunities for new businesses and jobs. The action plans for 10 sectors such as electronic waste, end-of-life vehicles, used oil waste, toxic and hazardous industrial waste are already ready. The focus will now be on addressing important cross-cutting issues of infrastructure, reverse logistics, technology upgradation, and integration with informal sector. This will be supported by active public policies covering regulations, extended producers' responsibilities, framework, and innovation facilities. 5 to 7% biomass pellets will be co-fired in thermal power plants, resulting in carbon dioxide savings of 38 MMT annually. This will also provide extra income to farmers and job opportunities to locals and help avoid stubble burning in agricultural fields. Saving energy is an important aspect of the energy management. Hence, energy efficiency and savings measures will be promoted. This will be done in large commercial buildings through the energy service company business model. It will facilitate capacity building and awareness for energy audits, performance contracts, and common measurement of and verification protocol. 4 pilot projects for coal gasification and conversion of coal into chemicals required for the industry will be set up to evolve technical and financial viability. The policies and required legislative changes to promote agroforestry and private forestry will be brought in. In addition, financial support will be provided to farmers belonging to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes who want to take up agroforestry. Honorable Speaker, I now move to the 4th priority, financing of investments. Capital investment holds the key to speedy and sustainable economic revival and consolidation through its multiplier effect. Capital investment also helps in creating employment opportunities, induced enhanced demand for manufactured input from large industries and MSMEs, services from professionals, and help farmers through better agri-infrastructure. The economy has shown strong resilience to come out of the effects of the pandemic with high growth. However, we need to sustain that level to make up for the setback of 2020-2021. As outlined in para 5 earlier, the virtuous cycle of investment requires public investment to crowd in private investment. At this stage, private investments seem to require that support to rise to their potential and to the needs of the economy. Public investment must continue to take the lead and prime the private investment and demand in 2022-23. Considering the above imperative, the outlay for capital expenditure in the union budget is once again being stepped up sharply by 35.4% from 5.54 lakh crore in the current year to 7.50 lakh crores in 22-23. This has increased to more than 2.2 times the expenditure of 2019-20. This outlay in 22-23 will be 2.9% of the GDP. Effective capital expenditure, with this investment taken together with the provision made for creation of capital assets through grants and aid to states, the effective capital expenditure of the central government is estimated at 10.68 lakh crores in 22-23, which will be about 4.1% of the GDP. Green bonds. As a part of the government's overall market borrowings in 22-23, sovereign green bonds will be issued for mobilizing resources for green infrastructure. The proceeds will be deployed in public sector projects which help in reducing the carbon intensity of the economy. Gift IFSC. World-class foreign universities and institutions will be allowed in the GIFT city to offer courses in the financial management, fintech, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics free from domestic regulations, except those by the IFSCA, to facilitate availability of high-end human resources for financial services and technology. An international arbitration center will be set up in the GIFT City for timely settlement of disputes under international jurisprudence. Services for global capital for sustainable and climate finance in the country will be facilitated in the GIFT City. Infrastructure status. Data centers and energy storage systems, including dense charging infrastructure and grid-scale battery systems, will be included in the harmonized list of infrastructure. This will facilitate credit availability for digital infrastructure and clean energy storage. Venture capital and private equity invested more than 5.5 lakh crores last year, facilitating one of the largest startup growth system. Scaling up this investment requires a holistic examination of regulatory and other frictions. An expert committee will be set up to examine and suggest appropriate measures. Government-backed funds, NIIF and SIDBI, Fund of Funds, have provided scale capital, creating a multiplier effect. For encouraging important sunrise sectors such as climate action, deep tech, digital economy, pharma, and agri-tech, the government will promote these thematic funds for blended finance, with the government share being limited to 20% and the funds being managed by private fund managers. For financing the infrastructure needs, the stepping up of public investment will need to be complemented by private capital at a significant scale. Measures will be taken to enhance financial viability of projects, including PPP, with technical and knowledge assistance from multilateral agencies. Enhancing financial viability shall also be obtained by adopting global best practices, innovative ways of financing, and balanced risk allocation. Digital rupee. Introduction of a central bank digital currency will give a big boost to digital economy. Digital currency will also lead to a more efficient and cheaper currency management system. It is therefore proposed to introduce digital rupee using blockchain and other technologies to be issued by the Reserve Bank of India starting 2022 and 23. Financial assistance to states for capital investment. Reflecting the true spirit of cooperative federalism, the central government is committed to bolstering the hands of the states in enhancing their capital investment towards creating productive assets and generating remunerative employment. The scheme for financial assistance to states for capital investment has been extremely well received by the states. In deference to the requests received during my meeting with the chief ministers and state finance ministers, the outlay for this scheme is being enhanced from 10,000 crores in the budget estimates to 15,000 crores in the revised estimates for the current year. For 22-23, I'll repeat that sentence for the benefit of many of our honorable members. In deference to the requests received during my meeting with chief ministers and state finance ministers, The outlay for this scheme is being enhanced from 10,000 crores in the BE to 15,000 crores, 15,000 crores in the RE of the current year. For 22-23, the allocation is 1 lakh crores to assist the states in catalyzing the overall investments in the economy. These 50-year interest-free loans are over and above the normal borrowings allowed to the states, are over and above the normal borrowings to the states. This allocation will be used for PM Gati Shakti related and other productive capital investments of the states. It will also include components for supplemental funding for priority segments of PM Gram Sadak Yojana, including support for the state share, digitization of the economy, including digital payments and completion of OFC network, and reforms related to building bylaws, town planning schemes, transit-oriented development, and transferable development rights. In 22-23, in accordance with the recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission, the states will be allowed a fiscal deficit of 4% of the GSDP, of which 0.5% will be tied to power sector reforms, for which the conditions have already been communicated in 21-22. Fiscal management. As against a total expenditure of 34.83 lakh crores of rupees projected in the BE 21-22, the revised estimate is 37.70 lakh crores. The revised estimate of capital expenditure is 6.3 lakh crores of rupees. This includes an amount of 51,971 crores towards settlement of outstanding guaranteed liabilities of Air India and its other sundry commitments. Coming to the budget estimates, Honorable Speaker, sir, the total expenditure in 22-23 is estimated at 39.45 lakh crores, while the total receipts other than borrowings are estimated at 22.84 lakh crores of rupees. The revised fiscal deficit, Honorable Speaker, in the current year is estimated at 6.9% of the GDP, as against 6.8% projected in the budget estimates. The fiscal deficit is in 22-23 is estimated at 6.4% of the GDP, which is consistent with the broad path of the fiscal consolidation announced by me last year to reach a fiscal deficit level below 4.5% by 25-26. While setting the fiscal deficit level in 22-23, I am conscious of the need to nurture growth through public investment to become stronger and sustainable. I will now move to part B of my speech. Direct tax. Honorable Speaker, sir, I take this opportunity to thank all the taxpayers of our country who have contributed immensely and strengthened the hands of the government in helping their fellow citizens in this hour of need. So I have brought in a little verse from the Mahabharata. I won't spend more time reading because I would like the speech to get enough time. However, the substance of it is the king must make arrangements for Yoga Kshema, which is the welfare of the populace, by way of abandoning any laxity and by governing the state in line with Dharma, along with collecting taxes which are in consonance with Dharma. This is Mahabharata Shanti Parva Adhyaya, Shloka 11 from 72. Drawing wisdom from our ancient texts, we continue on the path to progress. The proposals in this budget, while continuing with our declared policy of stable and predictable tax regime, intend to bring more reforms that will take ahead our vision to establish a trustworthy tax regime. This will further simplify the tax system, promote voluntary compliance by taxpayers, and reduce litigation. Introducing new updated return. India is growing at an accelerated pace, and people are undertaking multiple financial transactions. The Income Tax Department has established a robust framework of reporting of taxpayers' transactions. In this context, some taxpayers may realize that they have committed omissions or mistakes in correctly estimating their income for tax payment. To provide an opportunity to correct such errors, I am proposing a new provision permitting taxpayers to file an updated return on payment of additional tax. This updated return can be filed within 2 years from the end of the relevant assessment year. Honorable Speaker, sir, presently, if the department finds out that some income has been missed out by an assessee, it goes through a lengthy process of adjudication. Instead, with this proposal now, there will be a trust repost in the taxpayers that will enable the assessee herself to declare the income that she may have missed out earlier while filing her return. Full details of the proposal are given in the finance bill. It is an affirmative step in the direction of voluntary compliance. Reduced alternative minimum tax rate and surcharge for cooperatives. Currently, cooperative societies are required to pay alternate minimum tax at the rate of 18 and 1.5%. However, companies pay the same rate, the same, which is the alternate minimum tax, at the rate of 15%. To provide a level playing field between cooperative societies and companies, I propose to reduce this rate for the cooperative societies also to 15%. Honorable Speaker, sir, I also propose to reduce the surcharge on cooperative societies from the present 12% to 7% for those having total income of more than 1 crore and up to 10 crores. This would help in enhancing income of cooperative societies and its members who are mostly from the rural and from farming communities. Tax relief to persons with disability. The parent or guardian of a differently abled person can take an insurance scheme for such person. The present law provides for deduction to the parent or guardian only if the lump sum payment or annuity is available to the differently abled person on the death of the subscriber, that is the parent or the guardian. There could be situations where the differently abled dependent may need payment of annuity or lump sum amount even during the lifetime of their parent or guardian. I propose thus to allow the payment of annuity and lump sum amount to the differently abled dependent during the lifetime of the parent and guardians, that is parent or guardians, attaining the age of 60 years. Parity between employees of the state and central governments. At present, the central government contributes 14% of the salary of its employee to the National Pension System, NPS, Tier 1. This is allowed as a deduction in computing the income of the employee. However, such deduction is allowed only to the extent of 10% of the salary in case of employees of the state governments. To provide equal treatment, to both central and state government employees, I propose to increase the tax deduction limit from 10% to 14% on employers' contribution to the MPS account of state government employees as well. This would help in enhancing the social security benefits of the state government employees and bring them at par with central government employees. Incentives for startups. Startups have emerged as drivers of growth for our economy. Over the past few years, the country has seen a manifold increase in successful startups. Eligible startups established before 31/3/2022 had been provided a tax incentive for 3 consecutive years out of the 10 years from incorporation. In view of the COVID pandemic, I propose to extend the period of incorporation of the eligible startup by 1 more year, that is up to 31/3/2023, for providing such tax incentives. Incentives for newly incorporated manufacturing entities under concessional tax regime. In an effort to establish a global competitive business environment for certain domestic companies, a concessional tax regime of 15% was introduced by our government for newly incorporated domestic manufacturing companies. I propose to extend the last date for commencement of manufacturing or production under Section 115B(ab) by 1 more year, that is from 31st March 2023 to 31st March 2024. Scheme for taxation of virtual digital assets. There has been a phenomenal increase in transaction in virtual digital assets. The magnitude and frequency of these transactions have made it imperative to provide for a specific tax regime. Accordingly, for the taxation of virtual digital assets, I propose to provide that any income from transfer of any virtual digital asset shall be taxed at the rate of 30%. No deduction in respect of any expenditure or allowance shall be allowed while computing such income except cost of acquisition. Further, loss from transfer of virtual digital asset cannot be set off against any other income. Further, in order to capture the transaction details, I also propose to provide for TDS on payment made in relation to transfer of virtual digital asset at the rate of 1% of such consideration above a monetary threshold. Gift of virtual digital asset is also proposed to be taxed in the hands of the recipient. Litigation management to avoid repetitive appeals by the department. It has been observed that a lot of time and resources are consumed in filing of appeals which involve identical issues. Taking forward our policy of sound litigation management, I propose to provide that if a question of law in the case of an assessee is identical to a question of law which is pending in the appeal before a jurisdictional high court or Supreme Court, in any case, the filing of further appeal in the case of this assessee by the department shall be deferred till such a question of law is decided by the jurisdictional high court or the Supreme Court. This will greatly help in reducing the repeated litigation between taxpayer and the department. Taking forward our efforts to further promote the IFSC, I hereby propose to provide that income of a non-resident from offshore derivative instruments or over-the-counter derivatives issued by an offshore banking unit, income from royalty, and interest on account of lease of ship and income received from portfolio management services in IFSC shall be exempt from tax subject to specified conditions. Rationalization of surcharge. In the globalized business world, there are several work contracts whose terms and conditions mandatorily require formation of a consortium. The members in the consortium are generally companies. In such cases, the income of these AOPs has to suffer a graded surcharge up to 37%, which is a lot more than surcharge on the individual companies. Accordingly, I propose to cap the surcharge of these AOPs at 15%. Further, the long-term capital gains on listed equity shares, units, etc., are liable to maximum surcharge of 15%, while other long-term capital gains are subjected to a graded surcharge which goes up to 37%. I propose to cap the surcharge on long-term capital gains arising on transfer of any type of assets at 15%. This step will give a boost to startup community, and along with my proposal on the extended tax benefits to manufacturing companies and startups, reaffirms our commitment to Atmanirbhar Bharat. Clarification in relation to health and education cess as business expenditure. The income tax is not an allowable expenditure for computation of business income. This includes tax as well as surcharges. The health and education cess is imposed as an additional surcharge on the taxpayer for funding specific government welfare programs. However, some courts have allowed health and education cess as business expenditure, which is against the legislative intent. To reiterate the legislative intent, I propose to clarify that any surcharge or cess on income and profits is not allowable as business expenditure. Deterrence against tax evasion. Honorable Speaker, sir, presently there is ambiguity regarding set-off of brought forward loss against undisclosed income detected in such operations. It has been observed that in many cases where undisclosed income or suppression of sales, etc., is detected, payment of tax is avoided by setting off of losses. In order to bring certainty and to increase deterrence among tax evaders, I propose to provide that no set-off of any loss shall be allowed against undisclosed income detected during search and survey operations. It has been noticed that as a business promotion strategy, there is a tendency on businesses to pass on benefits to their agents. Such benefits are taxable in the hands of the agents. In order to track such transactions, I propose to provide for tax deduction by the person giving benefits if the aggregate value of such benefits exceeds 20,000 rupees during the financial year. A few other changes are being made, the details of which are there in the finance bill. Indirect taxes. So remarkable progress in GST. GST has been a landmark reform of independent India, showcasing the spirit of cooperative federalism. While aspirations were high, there were huge challenges too. These challenges were overcome deftly and painstakingly under the guidance and the oversight of the GST Council. We can now take pride in a fully IT-driven and progressive GST regime that has fulfilled the cherished dream of India as one market, one tax. There are still some challenges remaining, and we aspire to meet them in the coming year. The right balance between facilitation and enforcement has engendered significantly better compliance. and enforcement has engendered better compliance. GST revenues are buoyant despite the pandemic. I would bring in something which I've got to know this morning, not part of my speech, but worth putting in here for the knowledge of the Honorable House. I would like to bring to the notice of this House that the gross GST collections for the month of January 22 are rupees 1,40,986 crores, which is the highest since the inception of GST. This has been possible due to rapid economic growth, recovery, post-COVID, This has been possible due to the rapid economic recovery post-COVID, as well as various policy and administration undertaken by central and state tax administrations. Taxpayers deserve applause for this growth. Not only did they adapt to the changes, but enthusiastically contributed to the cost of paying taxes. Special economic zones. In part A of my speech, I have referred to the proposed reforms in SEZs. Alongside, we will also undertake reforms in customs administration of SEZs, and it shall henceforth be fully IT-driven and function on the Customs National Portal with a focus on higher facilitation and with only risk-based checks. This will ease doing business by SEZ units considerably. This reform shall be implemented by 30th September 2022. Customs reforms and duty rate changes. Customs administration has reinvented itself over the years through liberalized procedures and infusion of technology. Faceless customs has been fully established. During COVID-19 pandemic, customs formation have done exceptional frontline work against all odds, displaying agility and purpose. Customs reforms have played a very vital role in domestic capacity creation, providing level playing field to our MSMEs, easing the raw material supply side constraints, enhancing ease of doing business, and being an enabler to other policy initiatives such as PLI and phased manufacturing plans. My proposal on customs side are aligned to these objectives. Project imports and capital goods. National Capital Goods Policy 2016 aims at doubling the production of capital goods by 2025. This would create an employment opportunities and result in increased economic activity. However, several duty exemptions, even extending to over 3 decades, in some cases have been granted to capital goods for various sectors like power, fertilizer, textiles, leather footwear, food processing, and fertilizers. These exemptions have hindered the growth of the domestic capital goods sector. Similarly, project import duty concessions have also deprived the local producers of a level playing field in areas like coal mining projects, power generation, transmission, or distribution projects, railway and metro projects. Our experience suggests that reasonable tariffs are conducive to the growth of domestic industry and make in India without significantly impacting the cost of essential imports. Accordingly, Honorable Speaker, sir, it is proposed to phase out the concessional rates in capital goods and project imports gradually and apply a moderate tariff of 7.5%. Certain exemptions for advanced machineries that are not manufactured within the country shall continue. A few exemptions are being introduced on inputs like specialized castings, ball screw, and linear motion guide to encourage domestic manufacturing of capital goods. In the last 2 budgets, we have rationalized several customs exemptions. We have once again carried out an extensive consultation, including by crowdsourcing, as a result of these consultations, more than 350 exemption entries are proposed to be gradually phased out. These include exemptions on certain agricultural produce, chemicals, fabrics, medical devices and drugs, and medicines for which sufficient domestic capacity exists. Further, as a simplification measure, several concessional rates are being incorporated in the customs tariff schedule itself instead of prescribing them through various notifications. This comprehensive review will simplify the customs rate and tariff structure, particularly for sectors like chemicals, textiles, and metals, and minimize disputes. Removal of exemption on items which are or can be manufactured in India, and providing concessional duties on raw material that go into manufacturing of intermediate products will go many a step forward in achieving our objective of Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat. I shall now take up specific sector-specific proposals. Electronics. Electronic manufacturing has been growing rapidly. Customs duty rates are being calibrated to provide a graded rate structure to facilitate domestic manufacturing of wearable devices, hearable devices, and electronic smart meters. Duty concessions are being given to parts of transformer of mobile phone chargers and camera lens of mobile camera module and certain other such items. This will enable domestic manufacturing of high-growth electronic items. Gems and jewelry. To give a boost to the gems and jewelry sector, customs duty on cut and polished diamonds and gemstones is being reduced to 5%. Simply sawn diamond would attract nil customs duty. To facilitate export of jewelry through e-commerce, a simplified regulatory framework shall be implemented by June this year. To disincentivize import of undervalued imitation jewelry, the customs duty on imitation jewelry is being prescribed in a manner that a duty of at least 400 rupees per kg is paid on its import. Chemicals. Customs duty on certain critical chemicals, namely methanol, acetic acid, and heavy feedstocks for petroleum refining, are being reduced, while duty is being raised on sodium cyanide, for which adequate capacity in the domestic arena exists. These changes will help in enhancing domestic value addition. MSMEs. Duty on umbrellas is being raised to 20%. Exemption to parts of umbrellas is being withdrawn. Exemption is also being rationalized on implements and tools for agricultural sector which are manufactured in India. Customs duty exemption given to steel scrap last year is being extended for another year to provide relief to MSME secondary steel producers. Certain anti-dumping and CVD on stainless steel and coated steel flat products, bars of alloy steel and high-speed steel are being revoked in larger public interest considering prevailing high prices of metals. To incentivize exports, exemptions are being provided on items such as embellishment, trimmings, fasteners, buttons, zipper, lining material, specified leather, furniture fittings, and packaging boxes that may be needed by bona fide exporters of handicrafts, textiles, leather garments, leather footwear, and other goods. Honorable Speaker, sir, duty is being reduced on certain inputs required for shrimp aquaculture so as to promote its exports. Tariff measure to encourage blending of fuel. Blending of fuel is a priority for this government. To encourage the efforts for blending of fuel, unblended fuel shall attract an additional differential excise duty of rupees 2 per litre from first day of October 22. A few other changes are being made in duty rates customs, tariff and customs law, the details of which are there in the finance bill. Mr. Speaker, sir, with these words, I commend the budget to this august House. Thank you.
Item number 2, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman ji.
Sir, with your permission, I rise to lay on the table the following statements under Section 3(1) of the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management FRBM Act 2003. Medium-term fiscal policy cum fiscal policy strategy statement and macroeconomic framework statement.
Item number 3, Vitt Videk 2020, Nirmala Sitharaman ji.
Sir, item number 3, Finance Bill. Sir, with your permission, I rise to move for leave to introduce the Finance Bill 2022.
प्रश्न ये कि वित्त विधेयक को पुनर्स्थापित करने की अनुमति प्रदान की जाए। जो सदस्य इसके पक्ष में हाँ गए, जो सदस्य विरोध में ना गए, मेरे विचार में निर्णय हाँ वालों के पक्ष में, हाँ वालों के पक्ष में। माननीय मंत्री जी, वित्त विधेयक को पुनर्स्थापित करें।
Sir, I introduce the bill.
सभा की कार्रवाई कल बुधवार दिनांक 2 फरवरी 2022 को 4:30 बजे तक के लिए स्थगित की जाती है।
Right, so that speech didn't last that long, 1.5 hours. Sometimes these speeches go on for hours and hours and hours. This time, only 1.5 hours. Rajiv Dubey is still with us. I'm going to try and... Rajiv, so some very interesting things, and I think the clear highlights, digital rupee, cryptocurrency, I think are there. But it's really that infrastructure spending, the capital spending that she announced, which I think has taken a lot of people by complete surprise.
Yes, Vikram, and classic Nirmala Sitharaman budget, micro details of almost everything. Typically, you don't see such details in finance minister's speeches, and she goes to great lengths to detail them out, and which is now become the hallmark of her speeches. Of this, I think the infra spend clearly is government is still determined to do all the heavy lifting in the economy as long as the private investment and to some extent private consumption does not come back into the economy. So I think the government is sees the responsibility and also has allocated 7.5 lakh crore up from 5.4. So that's an enormous increase in infrastructure. The other important thing is allowing states to raise more resources to the extent of 1 lakh crore over and above the existing resource mobilization that the states already do via centers allocations. That again is a huge impetus to where the budget is budget 2022 has brought in. The clarification for the first time. See, we still do not have the government stand on what they think a cryptocurrency is, but finally, at least there is one move to ensure that the cryptocurrency assets, when they are transferred, they are going to be taxed. The government still not very clear, and that possibly is going to come up in the next bill. I think the great disappointment is again going to be the middle class, because there's practically very little except for state employees.
So in fact, I'm going to just toss that to Rohit Vishkarma, the head of Hindi at Editorji. But before I do that, one or two other just quick things I want to draw people's attention to. Digital currency. The RBI is going to launch a digital currency on blockchain. It's very interesting to see what that actually means. Maybe a cryptocurrency bill will come. And from a startup point of view, one very long-standing demand that startups, people who are investing in startups are being taxed at a much higher rate in terms of long-term capital gains to people in listed companies. Nirmala Sitharaman has finally accepted that and capped all long-term capital gains at 15%. So investors and startups and others will presumably be happy. But रोहित, अगर हम आपकी तरफ आए तो एक चीज तो स्पष्ट है, लोग सोच रहे थे उत्तर प्रदेश के चुनाव आ रहे हैं, शायद कुछ ऐसी घोषणा की जाए जिससे लोग वहां खुश हो जाएं, मिडिल क्लासेस के लिए क्या है। पर एक बार जब कहा जाता है कि इतना सारा कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर पर इन्वेस्टमेंट होगा, इतना सारा गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर होगा, तो शायद मुश्किल हो जाता है टैक्सेस को कम करना। पर आपको क्या लगता है मिडिल क्लासेस के लिए क्या था इसमें?
देखिए, यूपी इलेक्शन की नजर में देखें तो किसानों को सरकार ने टारगेट किया है। दे हैव फोकस टोटली ऑन फार्मर्स। उनके लिए 2.737 लाख करोड़ का पैकेज रख दिया कि हम प्रोक्योर करेंगे, पैडी और व्हीट सब कुछ हम खरीदेंगे, और उसके अलावा किसानों के मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के सारे सामान सस्ते कर दिए हैं। किसानों के लिए कई और प्लान ला दिए, क्योंकि किसान वह बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा बन गए थे। मिडिल क्लास के लिए अगर बात करें तो बड़ा डिसअपॉइंटमेंट है। सुबह सुबह खबर आई बजट से तुरंत पहले कि कमर्शियल सिलेंडर को करीब 90 रुपए के आसपास सस्ता कर दिया गया है। तो ऐसा लग रहा था कि शायद वो सस्ता हो रहा है, तो कहीं ना कहीं उसका फायदा बजट में भी दिखेगा, लेकिन वो हुआ नहीं। अगर दूसरी तरफ देखें तो एविएशन फ्यूल बढ़ाया गया, तो उस समय लगा कि शायद अमीरों पर टैक्स बढ़ेगा और मिडिल क्लास पर टैक्स थोड़ा कम किया जाएगा, लेकिन वो पूरी तरह से चकनाचूर हो गया। दूसरी तरफ ये माना जा रहा था कि सरकार डायरेक्ट टैक्स अगर नहीं कम करती है हम पर, तो फिर ये हो सकता है कि टैक्स की जगह वो जो इन्वेस्टमेंट अपॉर्चुनिटीज है उनको थोड़ा और बढ़ा दे। जैसे कि टैक्स आपके 10D है या फिर आपके हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस है, उसमें शायद कुछ लिमिट बढ़ा दे, या फिर कुछ अदर इनकम में छूट दे। वहां भी सरकार ने कुछ नहीं किया। तो क्लियर कट इस समय सरकार एग्रीगेरियन पॉलिसी को देखते हुए आगे बढ़ रही है, बल्कि मिडिल क्लास को अभी उन्होंने फोकस में नहीं रखा है इस समय। कम से कम ये जो टारगेट है, अगर वोट पॉलिटिक्स के हिसाब से हम देखते हैं यूपी इलेक्शन को, तो बिल्कुल नहीं दिख रहा है।
शायद मिडिल क्लास का बजट आएगा अगले साल 2023 में, हो सकता है, संभव है। बट रोहित, आप बने रहिए हमारे साथ। मुकेश भूटानी now joining us, managing partner BMR Legal. Mukesh, your overall view first. What do you make of that?
The budget has no surprises. Clearly, the point that
surprised by the capital expenditure number or that new income tax scheme that for 2 years you can pay without any fuss.
Yes, this was a long-standing demand of the industry that the taxpayers should have right to revise their income. So what they have done, they have tabled a scheme which is a part of the finance bill, which will say that within a period of 2 years, which is 1 year, the ambit of omissions has been expanded to include declaration as well. So I don't think technically it is some form of a declaration scheme, but if a taxpayer wants to go forward and declare an income, then at least no penal consequences would be invited. So that's a positive surprise move, I would say. To Rohit's point on middle class, yes, it was widely accepted that because of the impeding elections, there would be more money put in the pockets of the middle class. But you see, there is a challenge over there that takes away substantial part of new taxpayers which have joined the tax bracket in the last 4 to 5 years out of the tax bracket, which goes against the larger economic objective of the government to expand the tax base in the country. So that's the underlying philosophy for not giving any benefit to the low income taxpayers.
Right. Piruz Khambata joining us now. Piruz, you've been watching this budget very closely you've seen all that's been happening in the rural sector and agrarian sector. Let me get your first quick take on what we've heard.
I think the first quick take is the budget is a very welcome step for the food sector in 3 regards, especially the fact that they have recognized the need for natural agriculture, organic agriculture, ensuring the best practices of the world are followed in agriculture, and also working with academia to make it happen. So that is, I think, a very good move. Second, recognizing that food processing is important and the agri infrastructure is equally important for food processing, the investments in the same, and obviously the PLI scheme, which also has been announced, which will also act as a catalyst, is also a very welcome move. Third, I honestly believe that the major employment generation possibilities are possible in the agri and rural sector only. And that has been recognized with a lot of benefits given to the sector, a lot of benefits given to FPOs. In fact, they have given some tax breaks to cooperative sector, which is good because the agriculture and dairy practices are too much in cooperative sector. So all these are very positive announcements for the agri sector. But I would also say that the fact that they have recognized that for Atmanirbhar Bharat, we also need to now start manufacturing in India. And a lot of project imports, a lot of exemptions were there in imports, and they are being now slowly phased out. I believe that is a very important move because I somehow believe that we need to really ensure that there's a level playing field for Indian companies. And there were a lot of these tax breaks and custom duties which were actually helping imports, and especially capital goods also, and many raw materials also. And many of the FTAs and PTAs which have been signed in the past were also coming in the way. So having recognized this and phasing out some of the custom duty things is very good for Indian industry, because overall in this whole pandemic, what I have learned is that we have to stand on our own feet. And to stand on our own feet, we have to really energize our industry by giving them level playing field, by giving EODB to them, which has been announced, what I call 2.0 on EODB. So these are all very welcome moves to really put more money into manufacturing where the money should lie. Third, the SEZ, which I believe was one of the best schemes of the earlier governments. And if we are able to revive SEZ, because the whole idea was to use SEZ as a driver for export growth, like has happened in many countries in the world. These SEZs have to be real, what I call like foreign zones. Now somehow it faltered, because when I was young, when SEZ started, I think this was a big game changer supposed to be, but it went flat. Now somehow I believe that this government can make it happen, like they have done with a lot of things. So if they can revive SEZs, then SEZs can be the fulcrum for growth for export-led industry, not only in manufacturing but services sector also, where a lot of SEZs have been made and a lot of SEZs are half working, not working. If they can revive, I think that would be a very big thing for industry. And
Correct.
similarly, the gift city also, and the benefits and the arbitration center in the gift city, which is very near to me, making it an educational hub for finances. That also, now the whole thing, that is how it plays. The gift city, the SEZ, and the whole package. That's how I look at it very positively that way.
All right. I know, Rajiv, you're bursting to ask a bunch of questions, Rajiv, but I'm just getting back to playing traffic policeman very quickly. Let me welcome Madan Sabnavis, back onto the show, Chief Economist of the Bank of Baroda. Madan, what to your mind were the highlights? Were you taken aback by the extent of capital expenditure that was announced? 55% jump. I mean, that was way beyond what even the most wild estimates were of any of the experts that I had heard earlier.
So the way I look at the budget is that this has been definitely an investment-oriented budget. We don't really know what are the details on the taxation front, so I can't comment on whether there is anything on the base or on consumption. But quite clearly, the government is quite steadfast in terms of making higher allocations for investment, both at the central level as well as the state level, which I think is a positive thing, something which we're talking of. But the only nagging part is, of course, that the fiscal deficit is going to remain high in numeric terms. When I say numeric terms, I would guess it's something in the region of 16.5 to 17 lakh crores, which also means that the overall borrowing of the government is going to be high. And this is going to be at a time when we're expecting private sector demand for credit to also pick up. So I do expect some bit of volatility in the market, or it's a bigger job in the hands of the RBI to ensure that they are able to manage liquidity in a way so that interest rates are kept at a reasonable level. Because if I just look at how the 10-year GSEC yield has moved from the start of the speech to the end of the speech, it's already gone up by around 5 to 6 basis points. So definitely there is a bit of concern in the market that there will be a higher borrowing program, which will lead to some pressure on liquidity and on interest rates.
Rajiv?
Would you agree I mean, I'd like to request the panelists to for their view. Would you agree that the government's focus will continue to remain now, it seems, again, on the supply side and not the demand side? And the big expectation that was there for this year, that at least in this financial year, there'll be some demand side measures, but it still seems like the government is probably thinks that the supply side consumption economy will fend for itself, will manage for itself, and it still needs to push the supply side harder.
Yeah, I think
But
we are again banking on the supply side impulses to prop up the economy. And there is nothing really on the demand side which one could see in the speech. One will have to look at the details of the documents to find out if there is something for people in terms of spurring demand consumption. So even in case we look at which are the sectors or which are the industries which seem to be positively impacted, it would all be those which are more on the supply side, on the capital goods side. So we're looking at the automobile sector, hospitality, so on and so forth. I think it's more on housing. These are all things which are benefits being given to the producers. But is there something which is going to spur demand for these particular products? I think that's something which is still